let's go ahead and call the February 16th, 2022 Board of Directors meeting for TTSA to order. And if everyone could hit mute, I'll go and join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. That would be appreciated. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you.
Amen.
All right, could you do roll call, please, Rochelle?
Yes. Director or Vice President Tresson.
Here.
Director Lewis.
Here.
Director Cox.
Here.
Director Smelser.
And here.
And President Wilkins.
Present. Thank you. Next item on our first item on our agenda is AB 361 action. And this would be consideration by the board through a majority vote to make a determination that it's appropriate to run the board meeting via Zoom as a result of the continuing COVID-19 emergency.
I'll move to approve AB 361.
And I'll second.
Thank you. We've got a motion and a second. Rochelle, is there any public comment on this?
I see, I'm sorry, let's see. I do not have any public comment on that item.
Okay, thank you. Any discussion by directors? Seeing none, Rochelle, if you could take the roll call.
Sure. Vice President Tresson.
Yes.
Director Cox.
Yes.
Director Smelser.
Yes.
Director Lewis.
Yes.
And President Wilkins.
Yes, and thank you. Next on our agenda is public comment. So it's an opportunity for any member of the public to address the board for up to 5 minutes for any items that are not on the agenda. Is there any public comment, Rochelle?
I have no, oh, I stand corrected. I have one person for public comment, and that is Pippin Nader. Just a moment. And go ahead, Pippin.
Great. Thank you, board. I'll be pretty brief this morning. I just want to thank you for the opportunity to speak. I did want to bring up legal fees today. I've brought this up before. It's not on the agenda. We're talking about $1.6 million. It seems like a lot of money that's been wasted on this. And I did also want to, point out that in light of the master plan, that value seems even less like tangible, right? It looks like there's some big costs coming up. I did also want to point out that the agency has spent nearly $250,000 in just the last, that being 2021 year. So on employment attorneys alone, that does not include Dick, of course. And I hope that the agency will shift their focus from fighting with employees to bring the plant back up to an acceptable operational level. Thank you.
Thank you, Pippin.
Thank you, Pippin. Is there any additional public comment, Rochelle?
I have no one else with their hand raised for public comment at this time.
Okay, thank you. Okay, next on our agenda is item 4, professional achievements, awards, and anniversaries. And I believe Vicki is going to take the lead on this.
Yes, good morning, President Wilkins and directors. This morning, I'd like to acknowledge one employee that has a 5-year anniversary, and that would be Daniel Rubenko from the Operations Department. Just want to thank Danny for his service and his hard work during those 5 years.
Great, thanks, Vicki.
Thanks, Dan.
All right, next on our agenda is our consent calendar. We have 2 items on there. One is payment of the general fund warrants, and the other is approval of the financial statements. I'm assuming the Finance Committee has reviewed both of these.
Yes, we have. I'll make the motion that we approve the consent calendar with as presented, and having Blake and I gone over both the general fund warrants and the financial statements. We found them in accordance.
Great.
I'll second that motion.
Got a motion by Director Lewis, a second by Vice President Trezin. Is there any public comment on this item?
I have no public comment.
No public comment. Any other comments from directors? Vicki, Rochelle, if you could do roll call, please.
Sure. Vice President Tresson,
Yes.
Director Lewis,
Yes.
Director Cox,
Yes.
Director Smelser,
Yes.
and President Wilkins.
Yes.
Motion approved.
All right. Thank you. Next on our agenda is item 6.1, which is a report out from the January 19th, 2022 closed session. Are you going to handle this for us, Dick?
I'll go ahead and provide the report.
Or Bruce got it? Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I just want to let you know that there was no action taken at the conclusion of the closed session from the last month's meeting on January 19, 2022.
Great. Thanks, LaRue. Next on our agenda is approval of the minutes of the regular board meeting from January 19th of 2022. So everyone
I'll
have
make
it
the
on.
motion for approval.
Thank you,
I'll
Lane.
second.
Moved by Director Lewis, seconded by Director Cox. Is there any public comment on this, Rochelle?
No public comment?
No public comment. If there's no other comments or questions by directors, if you could take the roll call, Rochelle?
Yes. Vice President Tresson,
Yes, I approve.
Director Lewis,
Yes.
Director Cox,
Yes.
Director Smelser,
Yes.
and President Wilkins.
Yes.
Motion approved.
Thank you. Next on our agenda is item 6.3, which is presentation of the master sewer plan. And are you going to lead this off, LaRue?
Yeah, we're going to let Jay go ahead and give a little summary of it, and then we'll hand it over to Carollo, who will provide a presentation for us.
Great, thank you.
Good morning, directors. President Wilkins. I am pleased to announce a presentation of the master plan. This has been, everybody's been waiting for this, and I'm pleased that it's being presented today. So in 2019, the board of directors authorized the agency to enter into a contract with Carollo for preparation of the plan. The purpose of the plan was to perform an evaluation of existing TTSA facilities to include the TRI and the plant, to assess existing and future regulatory requirements, assess the condition and capacity of existing facilities, estimate future flow and loads, develop and evaluate alternatives for upgrades and improvements to meet future conditions through a 25-year planning cycle, and to recommend a schedule and cost estimates for selected capital improvements accordingly. The scope of services of the plan required them to perform a series of elements, 12 elements. I won't bore everybody with those details because we're about to hear those details from Carollo themselves. It is in the report if you'd like to read those. Carollo recently completed all tasks identified in their scope of work and have finalized the plan. And today, representatives from Carollo will be presenting the principal findings of the plan. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Tim Loper with Carollo and Ricky Gutierrez with Carollo. Today, they'll be presenting the plan. Vicki, I think, or Rochelle, I think you're setting up controls to allow them to do that.
Yes, I've already done so. We have Tim Loper on the screen view, and his audio is on the telephone. And then Ricky Gutierrez is going to be sharing his screen presentation with us.
Great, thank you. Tim, you want to take it away?
Can everyone see the slides?
Yes, we can.
Thanks.
Okay, yeah, thanks, Jay, and members of the TTSA board, President Wilkins. We appreciate the opportunity today to come and talk about the findings and major elements of the multi-year effort that we've undertaken along with coordination with district staff to develop this 25-year capital program and improvement plan for TTSA. The agenda for our discussion here, we'll go through some team introductions, discuss background and planning parameters, the analysis for capacity and condition for the TRI, as well as the water reclamation plant, and also summarize the capital improvement program, and then take questions from the directors as they come up. So the Carollo project team, for those of you that don't know about Carollo, we're a water and wastewater consulting firm with 49 offices across the country. We've got 1,300 employees. I'm Tim Loper, like I said, I was the project manager and the principal in charge for this project. I've been working for Carollo for 19 years. My primary role is the chief of master planning services company-wide, so I manage the content and direction and technical approach for these types of projects for the whole company. We have Ricky Gutierrez here as well. He was our WRP evaluation lead. He's got 19 years of experience, and prior to moving to Truckee several years ago, he was a project manager and project engineer for almost $500 million of improvements for treatment plant projects down in the Sacramento area for Sacramento Regional Sand. We've also got Elisa Garvey, who will probably be joining us in a little bit. Elisa's a PhD in environmental engineering with 20 years experience, and she was involved and led the regulatory review and analysis. Other members of the team were Ron Appleton, Stanford-educated, 25-year expert in process and capacity analysis. He's developed process and capacity models for agencies all across the country. Also is Ryan Orgill, 16 years of experience. He's Carollo's lead company-wide on collection system planning and modeling. And Coral Taylor, who did a significant chunk of work on this project. Coral, prior to joining us a couple years ago, worked for Tahoe City PUD and North Tahoe PUD for close to 15 years, and she's intimately familiar with the issues of collection and treatment of wastewater in the North Tahoe Truckee region. And so, beyond our experience and what we bring to the team and the development of this project, myself, Ricky, Elisa, and Coral, all Truckee locals, and this project was especially important to us because, we swim in the river and we ride our bikes down the Legacy Trail, and it was important for us, this project, because we were able to contribute to the community and develop a plan that's going to help the agency manage and meet its environmental regulations for the next 20 years. Go ahead, Ricky. So just a little background, TTSA, many of you know this, but for those that don't, it's formed in 1972, 5-member districts, as well as collection of wastewater from North Star CSD. You can see the map here on the right that shows the service area that TTSA is responsible for collection and treatment of wastewater. And they own and operate the Truckee River Interceptor, which runs from Tahoe City to the treatment plant, as well as the water reclamation plant, which treats the wastewater and discharges it into a soil aquifer basin before it enters into the river. Hi, Rick. The master plan, development of the master plan, we started with the basics of looking at the agency's mission statement. And from the fundamentals of that mission statement, we developed level of service goals specific to collection and treatment of wastewater, as well as the management of the agency. And from those goals, we looked at implementation strategies and developed projects that feed into the CIP, which we'll summarize today. So it started at the top of, understanding what was important to the agency and developing projects that help them meet those goals in order to comply with environmental regulations. So there was a number of foundational information and data that was used in order to do the analysis. As part of this project, Carollo developed 3 new modeling tools that the agency has and is going to be using in the future. We developed a capacity analysis model for the TRI, a hydraulic model for the WRP that looked at the liquid flow through the treatment plant. We also developed a biowind model that looked at organic loading and the treatment of that organic load and other nutrients and constituents at the WRP. But those three tools had to use the basic flow information that we collected and aggregated and evaluated based on historical and past flows into the treatment plant. This table here summarizes those flows for existing and projected future conditions to 2045. There's a number of parameters that we looked at: base wastewater flow, average dry weather flow, which is essentially the flow that is influent to the plant during dry weather conditions. And one of the more important ones was what we call the high occupancy flow. What flows and loads is the treatment plant, the TRI seeing during periods of time like New Year's or July 1st or July 4th, excuse me. Those periods of time where there's a lot of people in the region and there's a significant amount more of flow being discharged into the collection system in the treatment plant. We also looked at peak wet weather flow. So that's the flow that occurs in the collection system during wet weather rain events or rain on snow events. And we analyzed a 10-year, 24-hour event to determine what that peak flow is. And the capacity of the TRI and the analysis of the TRI is specifically based on these numbers. And you can see the peak wet weather flow for current conditions is about 22 MGD, and out to 2045, it reaches close to 30 MGD. We also used parameters such as the peak wet weather flow, the high occupancy flow peaking factor, and those were 3.4 and 3.7. I did want to highlight here, the high occupancy flow for existing conditions is about 6.4, and that is projected to increase to about 9.7 MGD in 2045. So, just to summarize, existing and projected, we're looking at average dry weather flow projections to increase about 50% or 49% between now and the end of the planning period. High occupancy flow increases about 52%. And peak wet weather flows are expected to increase about 37%. And then specific to the treatment plant, organic loads are projected to increase, again, similar, around 53%. And it is important to note that currently the WRP is operating at higher peak flows and loads than anticipated in 2003, which was the basis for the last plant expansion. So those are some of the foundational elements of flow that we used. To develop those flows, we looked at each individual contributing agency's existing and planned flows for 2045 and developed a breakdown by agency of the flows within all those contributing agencies. And this table summarizes average dry weather flow and estimated maximum high occupancy flow for 2045. And so you can see on the bottom line is also the percent increase in flow in 2045 for each one of the contributing agencies. Some things to highlight here, the low end of the growth range is Tahoe City PUD at about 7% growth range. The high end would be Olympic Valley at 181% growth from existing to 2045, and a lot of that is based on the plans that Palisades Tahoe has for expansion of the village and things like that. We did look individually as well at peak wet weather flows coming in from each contributing agency to develop the peak flows that were used for the capacity analysis. And all of this information and the foundations and the justification for these flows are contained in the report. So now I'm going to talk about the analysis that we did for the TRI on the capacity side. I'm also going to talk about the analysis we did on the condition assessment. Like I indicated earlier, we developed a SWIM model of the TRI. We calibrated that model to a long history of historical flow events during multiple storm events, as well as high occupancy flow events, in order to ensure the accuracy of that model for the analysis. What these two graphics show is, on the left is the rainfall hyetograph that we generated for each one of the geographical regions associated with the contributing agencies. So you can see, Tahoe, Donner Lake, and other regions, the specific rainfall that would be attributed to a 10-year, 24-hour design storm event. And those were applied spatially within the model to simulate peak wet weather flows. And this chart on the right shows the 2045 condition, or the hydrograph coming into the treatment plant that was used for the analysis. And you can see the dash line on the bottom shows the high occupancy flow at 2045, as well as the peak wet weather flow rising up there on the left-hand side of the chart up to 30 MGD. And these were the basis for the capacity analysis of the TRI. And the findings that were highlighted here on this slide. The good news is the TRI has sufficient capacity to convey the existing peak wet weather flow conditions of about 22 MGD. So right now there's, the TRI has capacity to handle all the existing high occupancy flow as well as peak wet weather flows. As growth occurs in the basin, what we found is that by 2030, there will be 2 reaches of the TRI that need to be upsized for capacity reasons to handle that peak wet weather flow. And these two reaches of pipe are shown on the figure on the right. The first one, project C-1, is about 5,000 feet of 24 and 27 inch gravity main that will be upsized to 30 inch. And that's down in the region of the River Road near Bridge 9. The other reach is approximately 1,000 linear feet of 24 inch gravity main that will be upsized to 30 inch, just north of Goose Meadows there. And these two are obviously planned as to be implemented as growth occurs. And we place them in the CIP in phase 3 and phase 4. So overall, a fairly good news story about the current condition of the TRI, but there are some expected capacity increases as growth occurs in the basin. So the next element was the condition assessment and rehabilitation recommendations. And this component of work included multiple task elements. The agency has compiled an extensive database of inspection data and CCTV data and condition scoring of the TRI. We took all of that information and data and aggregated it into a single database in order to compare conditions as they've changed over time. We developed recommendations related to that condition assessment finding and developed anticipated capital projects. We also prioritized those rehabilitation projects and placed them within the 20-year CIP based on risk, and also looked at capital cost expenditures associated with those improvements. The findings from the TRI were interesting, and they do involve some explanation. So we utilized the NASCO PACP scoring system, which uses a rating of 1 through 5, 1 being essentially new pipe, all the way to 5, which indicates the need for some near-term improvements. The unique element of the TRI and the majority of the grade 5 defects that are shown in this pie chart here, the 9.21 miles, is that the inspections have found manufacturing defects in the TRI. And there's a picture of this surface reinforcement visible defect in a specific reach of pipe in the TRI. And so what we found was that there'll be specific reaches of the TRI. A reach of pipe from manhole to manhole has several pieces of pipe within it, and there'll be one stick of pipe that may be 20 or 30 feet long that has this defect, and then pipe right next to it, either upstream or downstream, will look almost brand new. So we know that these defects aren't the result of degradation from hydrogen sulfide exposure or other elements that could cause pipeline degradation. We've determined that these were defects that were associated with the construction of the pipeline piece itself. So while this graphic shows a significant amount of grade 5 defects, the bulk majority of them are associated with this manufactured defect in the pipeline. And we've developed a plan, to implement some further investigations into this surface reinforcement visible to determine the real risks associated with the TRIs and this element of it. Overall, in general, the other reaches of the pipe are in very good condition. There are 3 reaches of pipe that we did highlight for near-term improvements because of condition, and those pipe reaches are elements that go underneath the Truckee River. They're different material than the other portions of the TRI. And those river crossing projects were identified as R1, R2, and R3, and you can see them, the locations of those crossings on the figure on the right-hand side of the slide. River crossing R1 is about 1,300 feet of 24-inch pipe. That project is set to move forward and to commence in 2022. Estimated cost is about $2.4 million. The other 2 reaches of pipe are significantly shorter, about 220 feet of 30-inch pipe, and those are about $500,000 each. Again, those are scheduled at the latter portions of phase 1 in 2025. The other thing that we included 2 other elements of the TRI renewal program. Our R4 is an allocation of costs over phases 2 through 5 of close to $16 million for annual rehab and rehabilitation projects. As for future investigations, find them. The agency undergoes a inspection program where they inspect the entire TRI over the course of 3 or 4 years. As new degradation and replacement needs come about, this money will be allocated in order to provide funding for that in the future at the later phases of phases 2 through 5. The other thing that we included was a visible reinforcement study. We've included some money as a specific project for the agency to go in and do further investigation on the surface reinforcement issues that I discussed in the previous slide. So that's a summary of the capacity and the condition of the TRI. And now Ricky's going to take over talking about the WRP capacity and rehabilitation project summary.
Thanks, Tim. Assume everybody can hear me okay. So I'm going to review the WRP first, starting with the rehab and rehabilitation project recommendations. Similar to with the TRI, we evaluated the treatment plant both in terms of capacity as well as the condition of the plant, and then also looked at places where we could optimize certain processes in the plant to provide either better performance or cost savings for things such as chemical use and other things. So moving forward, the plant was constructed in phases. The original construction was in 1975, and the figure on the right shows basically color-coded the different processes throughout the plant. This is a map of the WRP showing in different colors the years of construction. And so yellow is 1975, and what you can see here is that a large portion of the plant, I would say more than 50% of the plant was constructed in that original 1975 construction, and is now approaching about 50 years of service life. So we'll see as we get into the recommendations for the rehabilitation that a lot of these projects are related to just aging equipment and aging treatment plant, which is not uncommon given that wastewater regulations started in the 1970s with discharge requirements. So major expansions were in 1981. In 1990, phosphorus removal was added, as well as a maintenance facility. 1995 was the chlorine building and headworks building additions. And then the last major expansion was in 2003, which expanded the process capacity as well as added the biological nitrogen removal facility. So we, similar to what Tim described for the TRI, we followed a similar condition scoring system for the WRP with the rating of 1 to 5, 1 being excellent and 5 being very poor. For the excellent condition, these are close to new in terms of the equipment condition. They only require preventative maintenance and have more than 75% of their useful life remaining. Where we get down to very poor, this gets progressively worse. Down to very poor is something that has failed or will likely fail imminently, and there might not be parts available to replace those due to the age of the equipment, and so those are obviously things that would need immediate repair and are high on the priority list. So as we went through, we spent several days out at the plant with several engineers of different disciplines. We had structural engineer, electrical, instrumentation, as well as mechanical and process engineers looking at various equipment along with TTSA operations and maintenance staff, and went through and scored the various process components and equipment throughout the plant, as well as looked in detail at the structures themselves. So we had to make some judgment calls based on when timing of different improvements made sense throughout the plant, and also looked at grouping these into larger projects where they made sense, as that is usually the most efficient way to handle certain things, just due to the way these plants operate. Things have to stay in service and keep flow running through the plant. So you want to aggregate as much as you can to minimize shutdowns and reduce operations and maintenance staff time when dealing with these construction projects. So when we were looking at when to implement, obviously components that were nearing the end of their expected life or had major issues or were a safety concern were in that near term 0 to 5 years, phase 1 is what we called it. Projects that were approaching the end of their life but still were functional and had some life left were in phase 2, the 6 to 10. And then other long-term projects needed to address future capacity or preventative measures such as coating and other improvements were in that later phase 5, 11 to 25 years out. So this map shows the various projects throughout the WRP that were identified as rehabilitation projects. We identified a total of 35 rehab projects in the CIP. And so each of those squares with letters in them in the legend reference down to this table down in the legend below. And these codes, such as WRP-32 or WRP-28, those reference back to the capital improvements program tables that have the costs and phases built into those. So you can reference, this just basically shows the location of the plant, and you can see that, the area down here where there's a lot of these rehab projects, this is the original plant construction, 1975. So a lot of this 1975 equipment that's approaching 50 years of life is in need of rehabilitation. And that's why you see a large amount of rehab projects identified throughout the plant. So next I'll get into the capacity project recommendations. So starting out, I wanted to kind of give a little synopsis on how we performed the capacity analysis for the WRP. This was a two-part analysis where we had two separate models. One is a hydraulic model using visual hydraulics, where we looked at the hydraulic capacity of the plant, how the plant can handle influent flows and hydraulically get those through the plant or to storage if it can't get them through. Additionally, using the BioWind model, we looked at the process capacity analysis, both in terms of the liquid processes as well as the solids handling processes, and the ability of the plant to treat flows and meet the discharge requirements. So the criteria that was used was, we looked at the peak instantaneous permitted flows of 15.4 MGD. We also looked at the 10-year 24-hour storm event for future conditions in 2045, as well as the future max week high occupancy summer flow conditions in that future, which was 8.13 MGD. And that was important for modeling this process capacity analysis, since that's when you have the highest loads going through the plant in the future. So with the hydraulic capacity summary, it's basically a good news story. No hydraulic capacity limitations were identified for meeting those future peak instantaneous flows. The hydrograph on the right, similar to the one that Tim showed earlier, shows that 2045 10-year 24-hour storm event. The dashed line on the bottom here shows the high occupancy flows. The blue line shows that peak wet weather storm event, which is hitting near 30 MGD. And so 15, if you draw a line across here at 15.4, which is what can be pushed through the plant, you'll see that the shaded area is the volume that can't be passed through the plant and has to go to storage. So we identified that with this design storm event, 13.4 million gallons of flow would need to be diverted to storage. Fortunately, the plant has plenty of storage capacity. The emergency retention basin at the plant can store up to 15.4 MGD. So it can handle that design storm event. For larger storms, there's additional offsite storage ponds that have a capacity of 24 MGD. So close to 40 million gallons of storage capacity available to handle large storm events. So no concerns in terms of hydraulic capacity. In terms of process capacity, this chart shows a few things. So basically, if you look on the left of the chart, it shows the various processes through the plant, both liquid processes up here, solid processes down here, such as digestion, centrifuge, dewatering, and storage. And what the vertical lines are showing here, this is the data that was analyzed, is 2017, 2018 data for where the plant was operating in terms of max week summer flows. So again, this is the high load condition during 4th of July week when there's high occupancy in Truckee and where it currently is. And then the red line shows what's projected, what those flows would be projected to be in 2045. So just a little over 8 million gallons a day. And so you can see for the current conditions, there's plenty of capacity in terms of process capacity, no limitations. But when we get out to 2045, there were a few processes, 3 to be specific, that had some deficiencies. The first is the biological nitrogen removal, specifically the denitrification part of that process had some limitations. And so there's a project looking at a nitrified effluent recycle that could help mitigate that. Anaerobic digestion, there was some limitations in terms of volatile solids removal. And so there's some process modifications that were recommended to address that limitation. And then finally in cake storage, there was identified about a 2-day deficiency in cake storage, meaning that additional hauling would need to be required or additional cake storage needed. And cake is basically what we call the dewatered solids that come out of the treatment process. So in terms of capacity projects, 8 capacity related projects were identified throughout the plant. Similar to what I showed before for the rehab projects, the letters here on the map, on the aerials show where those projects were identified. And the legend down here relates back to the CIP and where those and the table for what those projects are and the identification of each of those. So far less capacity related projects than rehabilitation related projects, which makes sense given what the findings showed. And then there was one last category of projects which we termed optimization improvements. And so I'll go through that. And part of what played into this was, as part of the master plan, we did a regulatory analysis looking at future regulatory scenarios at the plant. What could be in store for in the future from the regulators in terms of what changes to the permit requirements and discharge requirements may come down the road. So we looked at 4 different scenarios as part of this analysis that we deemed could be possible in the future. One is the waste discharge requirements could remain the same. So no real change there. But even if they do stay the same, there's places where we could look at process optimization. And so that's what we looked at there. There could be more stringent nutrient limits in the future. And so this would require some optimization as well as potentially some process upgrades. There's a chance that there could be a requirement to go to a National Pollutant Discharge Elimination System permit, an NPDES permit, with additional limits that could be in terms of disinfection byproducts or DBPs, organics, toxicity, metals. A lot of those things could be rolled into an NPDES that would require additional process modifications and additions to the plant. And finally, There could be more stringent total dissolved solids limitations or chloride limitations. And this scenario, although unlikely, would have significant ramifications for the plant, would require going to a partial reverse osmosis treatment to remove those dissolved solids. And so obviously much more cost impactful in terms of costs. So when we decided what we plan for, what is the likelihood of each of these scenarios happening, we decided to plan for the first 3 scenarios as they had the highest likelihood of occurring. So we have projects that are identified to address all the first 3 scenarios if they were to occur. For the 4th scenario with the partial RO treatment, we have a memo in the master plan that you'll see that looked at space planning and for these facilities, but we haven't incorporated the costs into the CIP for this, since it is at this point it's unlikely that that the plant would need to go there. So for optimization projects, there were 6 projects that were identified for process optimization throughout the plant. And those are listed here. The first is called a wash strip implementation. The goal of this project would be to reduce lime usage and create a marketable phosphorus product. So there could be some significant cost savings for TTSA if this project's implemented. So it seemed to be worthwhile to look at. The next projects here are for nitrified effluent recycle, and this is to address the denitrification process limitations. Also, the goal would reduce methanol consumption and could also reduce odors by recycling nitrified effluent to the head of the plant. It also includes some washdown equipment for the BFE pond. The next one here is flow equalization improvements. This would add some additional cleaning abilities to the ballast ponds, which are currently very operator intensive to clean out. So that would facilitate that. Project 29 is a biogas storage project. That goal is to provide additional gas storage as future regulations may require more biogas utilization and less use of the flare. And then finally, the project 29 disinfection process monitorization looks at replacing the gaseous chlorine with some other technology due to the hazardous nature of chlorine gas, and TTSA would like to move away from that. So that is also included in the CIP. So finally, we'll get into the numbers, the costs for the master plan. So the 25-year CIP, as I mentioned before, is grouped by project type, rehab repair projects, capacity improvements, optimization improvements, and other category. Addresses aging infrastructure, reduces risks of overflows in the TRI, addresses future capacity limitations in the WRP, optimizes the treatment processes at the WRP, and there was some project implementation considerations as well in terms of, as I mentioned, looking at timing of new regulations, bundling projects into larger CIPs to reduce administration efforts as they made sense. And then prioritizing asset replacement needs. You know, there's a lot of old infrastructure out there that needs to be replaced. And so making sure that we prioritize what needs to come first so that the plant can continue to meet its discharge requirements was particularly important. So the costs, the total cost of the 25-year plan is $144.6 million. Out of that, a majority of that is for the treatment plant. 115.7 million was for the WRP versus 28.9 million for the TRI improvement that Tim discussed earlier. These are planning level cost estimates, which is, you know, at this level, we haven't gone into the detailed design of any of the improvements, but we have based these costs on other similar size projects and taken into account escalations and where the cost climate is currently. So they're relatively conservative estimates because of this level of planning or level of where we are in the design. Project costs include allowances for estimating contingencies, since it's there's contingency in there just due to the level of development of the projects, engineering, design, future permitting costs, as well as construction administration costs are all included in those costs. The costs are based on November 2021 dollars, which is when that effort was completed, and no escalation is included for that. So those that would be part of a future rate study to look at the escalation of those. And then the need and timing of future projects in 4 and 5, it's important to note that those could shift as new information comes out. I think, the nearer term projects are more well-defined. Later term projects, when we're talking about looking 20 years out, things can change. And so there's flexibility that will be needed when looking into the future, but at least the costs are there to cover the needs that we see for that for future improvements. So for the near term 5-year phase 1 capital improvements, this is starting now through 2027, next 5 years, focusing on the focus here is on rehabilitation and replacing assets that have exceeded their useful service life. Total cost is about $40 million, about $8 million a year. About close to $3 million of that is for the TRI, and the remaining is for the WRP. This table here breaks down the 25-year capital improvements. This costs are in millions of dollars for the TRI. These costs are only for the TRI. And you see here on the left of the table, they're broken down into 3 types: capacity, condition, and other. I guess one takeaway from this chart, thing to highlight, other than the $29 million in total costs, is that you see in phase 1, we're looking at phase 1 and 2, we're looking at condition projects, addressing those condition issues that Tim had mentioned. And then when we get into phase 3 is when we start to address those capacity issues for those future peak wet weather flow events that we discussed. And those and that's when those capacity projects are implemented in phase 3 and 4, as well as additional condition related projects here throughout phase 3 through 5. So in general, condition projects are about close to 70% of the total. Capacity projects are about 30%. For the WRP, again, similar to the one I just showed you, but this is for the treatment plants for the next 25 years, costing millions of dollars. You see here the total is about 116 million. Of that, about close to 60% is for rehabilitation. About 26% is process optimization, and about 23% is process optimization, and a little over 20% is capacity related. So similar to the TRI. Again, similar to the TRI, you'll see here in the first couple phases, it's heavy on rehab, $30 million in rehabilitation for phase 1. In phase 2, we have some small capacity related project in phase 1, but most of those capacity projects come further down in phase 3 and 4. And then some of the optimization projects are few early on, but most towards the end of the CIP. And that's when I talked about prioritizing, we're trying to spread out costs through the 25-year period so that there's, ratepayers aren't saddled with a huge amount of costs right off the bat, but addressing the rehab requirements that are needed at the plant to keep the plant operational. And with that, I'll hand it back over to Tim.
Thanks, Ricky. So yeah, that's the summary of the effort that we put in over the last several years to develop the CIP, but there are few people that we would like to thank. You know, anytime you engage in a huge planning effort like this, there is a lot of work that the agency has to collaborate with us on. And, you know, Jay Parker and his team, Michael Peak and Richard and the operations and maintenance staff were really instrumental in collaborating with us to make this project happen as smoothly as it has. Like I said, it's a lot of work, and it does require significant contributions from agency staff. So we couldn't have done it without you, and we look forward to seeing these projects happen in the future. Thank you.
All right, thanks. Does staff want to have any concluding comments on this presentation?
Just thank you, Tim and Ricky, for a great presentation and great work on the master plan. I think at this point, the River Dam, we were going to open up to questions.
Great. So questions, I see Lane with a question or comment, and you're muted, Lane.
Okay, I got a question with regards to capacity and the connection fees. I mean, are we looking at any, when we look at increasing the capacity within the plan or the TRI, those charges should go directly to connection fees, right? For the CIP projects that those are affiliated to?
Yeah, the projects that are affiliated with capacity should be assessed to the connection fee.
Okay. My other question was, when we're looking at the TRI, you're looking at C1 and C2 improvement projects. As far as increasing the capacity of the TRI, how much more MGD with those two projects would be the total amount of capacity, what's existing now and once those two projects are done?
Well, it does increase the capacity. I can handle that if you want.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Lane, it increases the capacity in the TRI so that the entire reach can convey the 30 MGD peak wet weather flow underneath the design criteria for sizing of those pipelines. So it's essentially going from, you know, the 29 to the 30. So it's a 10 MGD increase, but it does, you know, the capacity increase does provide a buffer in there for conservatism. You know, the thing to remember about those capacity increases is that you have time to track EDU generation and as flows increase to trigger those projects when they're needed instead of just, planning for them in phase 3. It will be based on growth and development and increase in flows over time.
But you're saying for the next, let's look at this on the next 15. I mean, nothing's going to be needed within that next 15 years as far as TRI capacity is what your study is showing, correct?
Correct. Yeah. That's based on the planning assumptions that we collected for each one of the individual agencies. Yeah.
And the most necessary improvements are on those river crossings, correct?
That's correct.
And are you talking about on those 3 river crossings, the first one of the most expensive is 5,000 lineal feet. Are you talking about removal? Are you talking about slip lining? What are you talking about as far as construction costs on that one? Because those are all cast iron pipe, right?
That's right. Yeah. So you want me to handle that, or you want to answer that one?
Yeah, you want to, so I'll start and you can embellish as necessary. Lane, the first step on that is to study the river crossing, because what we've heard from during some preliminary research is that there may be some challenges with respect to slip lining it. So we need to tackle that, see if they are indeed real challenges that need to be addressed. And if they can't be successfully, managed or addressed, we may need to go to a different technique. So in order to know the best alternative there, similar to the digestion improvements project, we need to the first phase would be a study, which would kind of dictate which direction we'd go there. Tim, is there anything you want to add on to that?
No, that's essentially what I was going to say. The plan is to investigate the alignment, alternatives for bypass pumping, other things that could be paramount to, rehabbing those pipelines, and develop recommendations. And once those recommendations are in place, then there's a greater understanding of costs and implementation strategies and challenges, things like that.
I'll chime in real quick, since I think part of Lane's question was related to the basis of the cost estimate that was used, and in terms of
right.
Yeah. For that, we TTSA had done some previous river crossing projects, and so we used the cost from those previous projects, escalated, of course, to the current dollars as the basis for planning those requirements, or that project itself.
Yeah, thanks, Ricky.
When we did that replacement river crossing at Alpine, were those, I mean, we didn't take out the pipe, did we? I mean,
no, that was a CIPP. So essentially, think sock liner. You're taking
right.
The host pipe, the existing pipe, and it becomes the host pipe for the interior liner. So no, it was not taking out the existing pipe. Whereas on the 81 to 83, it was a wholesale removal of the pipe, removal and replacement.
And you took out some pieces of that pipe, and it did examination on that pipe on 81 to 83, and the pipe was extremely in good condition on that section, correct?
Yeah, so there have been a number of projects, several projects. One is 81 to 83. Another one was the Fanny Bridge project, and then the third was the Squaw Valley, the Olympic Valley Public Service District Truckee River Siphon project. And all three of those, we were able to see coupons actually touch and hold a portion of the pipe that came out, and we're able to see, some of the what these manufacturer defects, what those look like, and the observations on all three of those projects in different spots along the TRI were that the pipe was in very good condition, the concrete and the structural integrity. And
the project that was done at Alpine, okay, we've since gone over and videoed that line again after that project was done. And have you seen any deterioration in that project?
No.
So when we did it, we did it right, and it's functioning as anticipated, correct?
Yes.
And that was a line situation.
Yes.
And so you're talking about that, and I don't know how many lineal feet was that, Jay?
I think it was around 1,300.
Okay, so this would be this first one would be about 5 times, almost 4 times that size.
Not quite, but the difference would be that on that first one, we were lucky in that we had so many manholes. They were short runs. The tricky part on this river crossing job is that these stretches are very long, and therein lies the challenges on whether we're able to successfully line this next section.
Okay, which would require putting in new manholes, correct?
Yeah, I mean there's other challenges, but yeah, that is one way to do that. But that's when you go and look at the project site, that's easier said than done. It may turn into a much larger project in terms of scope of work and capital improvements that need to be done. In order to do that, in order to put in a manhole, you may have to add a bunch of other improvements in order to get to the site that you want to put the new manhole in. So that's why it needs to be studied. It's not a slam dunk. Let's do exactly what we did at Alpine. It gets more complicated than that.
Okay, and there's private property issues?
It's different property issues, but yeah, we have a different number of different landholders that we need to coordinate, landowners that need to coordinate with.
All right, thank you.
If we could confirm, Tim, I think the 5,000 linear foot project is really the capacity increase where we're upsizing. The first river crossing was about 1,200 or 1,300 feet. Is that about right? I just want to clarify.
280.
That's correct. Yeah, that's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Wayne. Questions or comments from other board members?
Yeah, I got a little bit of a question here. When we talk about 5,000 feet of river crossing, is that the total amount of river crossings, or is that one river crossing? You know, I'm trying to figure out, you know, where all these river crossings are that would give us that 5,000. That's almost a mile of river crossings. Are we talking about pipelines that run next to the river or under the river?
Yeah, Dale, there's two categories of improvement projects. The rehab projects that cross underneath the river. There's 3 of them. 1380 you can see is RR1, and then 2 other additional river crossings are about 220 feet. The 4,000 foot project that you're, or 5,000 foot project that you're mentioning as a capacity upgrade, that's in another reach. It's not a river crossing. It's a piece of pipe that runs along the river down
That's
near
what I
Bridge
was
9.
thinking. Thank you.
Yeah, that's.
Jay, did you want to add any more additional information on the quantity of crossings with the first project? Because it's such a larger length.
Yeah, the first project is 4 river crossings all in one stretch, and there's only 3 manholes there: the beginning manhole before the first river crossing, the end manhole after the last river crossing, and 1 intermediate manhole. And I believe the total length there, Tim, is in the order of 12 to 1,400, 1,200, I think, or something like that.
Like 1,300 feet, yeah.
1,300 feet, and so I believe like one section, was, 800 feet long, and one was 500 feet long. That's in stark contrast to the other job in which we had only perhaps 100, 150 feet between each manhole. So it's a challenging site. Yeah.
And just to clarify, the other 2 are just single crossings, correct, Jay?
The other 2 are single crossings, correct. And the single crossings sometimes can be more complicated due to the bypass piping. You end up on the other side of the river. This first project, you end up on the same side of the river that you started on, which simplifies things from one perspective, but then when you look at the real estate, it's challenging from another perspective.
I have a couple of questions.
Yeah, please, Dave.
On that peak wet weather flow, what is it based on that it's going to increase 37% over the 10 years?
So the way that we developed the peak wet weather flow was we looked at hourly flow rates over a longer historical period of time to generate the I&I, or the infiltration and inflow, from each one of those agencies. Some of the agencies had larger contributing I&I factors as opposed to others. The rule is that some agencies will mitigate some I&I, but some agencies won't. And so as development occurs and expansion of those systems, with new growth, more I&I will be contributed to the system.
Got it. Okay. Thank you. The one more question was, if more stringent requirements are put on TTSA for, our capacity or whatever, what is the typical timeline? A regulation would come into effect, but what is the typical timeline that we would have to accomplish it?
That's a good question. Elisa, we've got Elisa Garvey here to talk about regulatory drivers. You want to touch on timelines for new permits and negotiations with Lahontan?
Sure. I missed part of your question though. You were breaking up on the audio. Can I?
Sorry about that. What I was asking is when more stringent requirements are put on TTSA for whatever, what is a typical timeline? Would they say, that we would have to accomplish whatever they required?
Okay. So from the point of a change in permit, you are, depending on what those changes in your permit requirements are, you will get a time schedule order. Typically, that is, again, it depends on how big of a change those permit requirements are, and the board knowing what it would take for you to fulfill those requirements. But usually those time schedule orders are between 5 and 10 years.
Good enough. Thank you.
Yep.
Other Lane, looks like you got another question.
Yeah, I got another question with regards to the plant. Tim, did you look at some of the repurposing of the facilities that we have? I mean, you showed, looking in the capital improvement programs, you showed a vehicle storage, at 2.1 million CIP project. I mean, in the AWT building, repurposing, did you look at repurposing some of the existing facilities that we have? Because we don't use the ionic exchange anymore. Taking that out, using that as a vehicle, storage area. And, what was the purpose of that? I mean, if that's 2.1 million was to build a new facility, why not reuse the old facility if it economically a better situation?
Yeah, we did look at all of that, demolition of the ion exchange and repurposing those facilities. The challenge is it's not, it does cost a lot of money to take all those facilities out, and the timing of that. I don't know, Ricky, if you want to add on to sort of how we phased out those things and prioritize those costs.
Yeah, I'm happy to hit on that. So Lane, when we're looking at, we do have a project in there that looks at, it includes removal of those obsolete facilities in the advanced water treatment process building. But the plan for the future for that facility is to house future treatment processes such as the disinfection, possibly disinfection project, or if that future RO project is required, that building could be used to house those future processes. It could be used in the interim, like you mentioned. It's possible that it could be used for other, storage, including vehicle storage. But I don't know that the configuration of it is optimal for the needs of the maintenance staff. So we assumed send that building aside for future process needs and a separate maintenance building for current needs.
Yeah, I'm just looking at, the disinfection unit, the chlorine facility is our newest facility. It's going to be down the road if, quite a few years down the road. And if something could be repurposed, I don't know, how much did you have in the budget for taking the ion exchange unit out of there? And what phase was that in?
Give me a second here. So that was in phase 3. So 2027 is the timing for that. And removal of that is about $1.7 million.
Jeez. Yeah, I mean, when you're looking at the facilities that we have, I mean, equipment storage and stuff like that is when you look at, okay, suppose we put a hold on, the disinfection unit at a different time, but as vehicle storage and stuff like that, that's something you can easily take out and move something else in at the time if disinfection becomes a UV system or something at a later date. You still have that availability to switch over. Vehicle storage, how many vehicles, why was that such a big priority at 2.1 million in phase one?
Yeah, and that's actually a project that was previously identified on the CIP by TTSA. So I guess I defer to TTSA staff on the need for that facility.
Okay.
But we did. We've had some discussions with staff about why that facility is necessary. Right now, they currently, I think, out at the plant, they've got a lot of things in one building, including vehicle maintenance, painting, welding. It's all kind of in one shop, and it's pretty crammed in there. So I can definitely see the need for additional space to to store vehicles and maintain vehicles.
Are we storing vehicles? Vehicle storage. These are movable, transportable vehicles. Where are we? Do we have capacity right now to store everything inside?
No, as of right now, we do not, Lane. We have, like Ricky said, we do have a building that's comprised of a shop, and then we have some paint storage, and then we have a storage for vehicles. That's already at full capacity. We're currently parking the remaining vehicles outside, and the idea is to have a building to keep them protected, have them prepared for emergency situations where they need to leave immediately. So it's also just a consolidated, because we do have them spread out at various locations at the plant. And
Yeah,
you're right, there's an opportunity for us to utilize certain locations in the interim, right? For when you're talking about removing the ion exchange building. When you do remove that, until something is replaced there, we can utilize it as a maintenance storage or other storage.
Yeah, I'm looking at it. There's no identification as far as how many square feet you need. It's just under vehicle storage on there. I'm looking at, I'm always looking at on the storage end of it too in my business, but you could put a stretch structure up there for vehicle storage that doesn't need to be, for far less cost. And we do have space at the plant for that. So I'm just looking at some of these cost factors that on these jobs in here. And trying to get some different ideas to look at as far as, whether we're going to repurpose, whether we're going to go for a new facility or not. These are all things that we need to consider when we're looking at these CIP projects.
Exactly. And I also want to add that we're not locked into these improvements. These are just plans. This is a roadmap for the future. We've identified a need for it. And when the time comes, we'll investigate it further and get more details into the size, exact needs, but we wanted to earmark it and have a location for it in the plan.
Okay, are you like what? We're talking snow loaders and stuff like that inside, or what are we talking about?
Loaders, pumps. I think some of the other vehicles. Do you recall precisely, Paul, by any chance? Richard's unfortunately not able to attend the meeting, so Paul is assisting. So I apologize for not declaring that earlier. Do you recall what other vehicles that we might want to put in there, Paul?
Yeah, so we do have pumps that are shuffled around the plant. We've got the Vector truck, we've got the dump truck. Excuse me, a lot of our larger and more expensive vehicles are shuffled around the plant, and it becomes difficult during inclement weather conditions to shuffle them around and get them in and out and keep them available for usage.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, I've got a question, if I may.
Please.
We briefly touched on our dewatering of the solid waste. And as we move forward in the development of the region, we are going to be facing an increased loading of our dewatered solid waste. And if I remember correctly, a few years ago, we had issues of finding places that would take our dewatered waste. Are you anticipating that Lockwood and some of these other plants that are taking hazardous waste are going to be remaining open, and that we are going to be able to dispose of our dewatered waste in the future?
You want me to hit on that one, or?
Do you want to hit that, touch on that, Ricky, please?
Yeah, so Dale, to specifically to address your question, yes, we're assuming that Bentley and Lockwood are still going to be the options for disposing of dewatered solids, as well as screening and grit material that's removed from the process. So we didn't assume that that they would need to go to an alternate facility. TTSA has the fortune of being close to Nevada, which gives them a lot more options compared to a lot of other utilities districts in California, where options have become more and more limited. And we have seen that. I think you bring up a good point that there is less and less options for utilities to dispose of this material. So many of, such as, American Valley CSD up in Quincy, they also go to Lockwood, as does South Tahoe goes to Lockwood. So a lot of these facilities that are near the border with Nevada are disposing of their materials in Nevada, and hopefully that continues to be allowed. If for some reason that isn't an option, I guess what would be needed is to go to Class A biosolids. So there would be some additional requirements and projects necessary to meet Class A biosolids.
To take our cake and refine it and through another process. Correct. To be able to make it comply with
to use as fertilizer. Yeah.
Yeah.
Correct.
Okay. When we talk about the ion exchange warehouse, so to speak, it'd been discussed in the past. Lane, I don't know if you remember, but we had discussed being able to take our solid waste and make it into a fertilizer with contributions from, wood chips and whatever else, to be able to make some kind of a fertilizer and be able to secure our ability to get rid of this solid waste that I see that there's a possibility that in the future it might become an issue for us to be able to dispose of this solid waste. And I'm hoping that your predictions are right, in as much as that these facilities will stay open.
Well, you know what, Dale, when we looked at becoming a Milorganite seller, basically, we looked at that, 15, 20 years ago, and it looked our climate in the cold, we weren't able to, it didn't make economic sense to do that.
Yeah, but we were talking about an outside facility, and we're looking at a significant amount of space inside that,
well, nothing.
We're looking at a big space out there.
That size of space would be like a Superdome type of facility. For inside use, for that, on the materials.
Yeah. I'm not aware of that, but
yeah, I mean, I like the idea. I mean, but there was a while back in the 90s when people were coming and picking the stuff up and taking it home and using it in their potting soils and stuff like that, and then we disallowed that from the because of the process and the possible contaminants in the waste. So
yeah, like the reason for my question is I've always thought that nothing is forever, and when we talk about something that we can't eliminate, and that's our dewatered solid waste, we're always going to have this as part of our operation. I'm a little concerned about the fact that Nevada might close the door on accepting all this contaminated waste. And if that happens, what's our alternative?
Yeah, I hear you, Dale. And we did look at biosolids as part of the regulatory review. We looked at because there are coming from the state different bills and regulations that are requiring less diversion to landfill of biosolids and that sort of thing, and how that would impact TTSA. We just didn't see in the 25-year horizon of the planning period a strong driver to go to Class A biosolids and the costs associated with that, which are pretty large. We just didn't see that within that 25-year window. It's not to say that it couldn't happen, but we just didn't see that likelihood as a huge likelihood of that happening, just given Nevada and how they've been in terms of regulations and allowing for disposal.
Okay. Thank you for taking care of that for me.
Thanks, Dale. Blake, did you have some comments or questions?
Yeah, a couple comments and questions. Well, we're on the topic of just the biosolids. I have a different perspective. I mean, that's a resource. I'm less concerned. Dale, you referenced it as hazardous waste and contaminated waste. I don't see it that way. I think our culture is also changing. There's a lot of movement towards recycled wastewater and recovering energy and nutrients. And so I'd like to see, hopefully down the road, this being a valuable resource that, we can put out on the desert or the fields, as opposed to something that we're going to get stuck holding. This is actually a resource that we have. And as much as we can as an agency look at our byproducts as resources, we should, and not couch them as hazardous waste or contaminated products. They're actually valuable resources. That said, this has been a time-consuming and expensive project preparing this master plan, but the end product, I'm very pleased with it. It's really, I'm grateful that we have this roadmap, a 25-year plan. The plant is getting older. We got so much stuff changing, and to have this now as a roadmap going forward, as opposed to just sort of staring down. It's like walking down a street, and if you're staring at your toes, you're going to fall in a pothole 5 feet in front of us. And now we have a vision. I want to compliment the Carollo team and the TTSA team in the way it was organized. I really was easy to follow. I think it's going to be something that's going to be easy to reference going forward in the future. And so I appreciate that. I'm going to bounce around a little bit here. The big question, so at the end of the day, we're going to be asked to, accept this plan. Again, it's just a plan. We've talked a lot about, detailed parts of it, the exact size of the vehicle storage facility or something like that. Those projects are going to have to be, staff, consultants, the board, we're going to have to evaluate, come up with recommendations, and the board eventually will have to approve each of those individual projects. But as a planning document, I think it really works. We still rely, this is not cast in stone, and every project in here should be done and cost exactly what it says. But it gives us a direction. At the end of the day, we're going to, be asked to approve the project, but that doesn't mean that, we're accepting these projects. And really, what this does is gives us that roadmap, and we're going to need to, so where do we go from here? It gives us some projects to start looking at, but we're going to need to, retain, I believe, a financial consultant that's going to need to come in and now evaluate the adequacy of the district's connection fees and user fees to make sure that, we're able to maintain the reserve levels as set forth in our reserve policy to do these projects and make recommendations on our connection fees and user fees as appropriate to do that. And this gives us, a big part of that puzzle. So some questions, you guys have outlined all the capital projects. I didn't see in there, whether or not a lot of them, and I was pleased to see, aren't really capacity related. They're just sort of, repairing, maintaining stuff that's already there or optimizing stuff. I didn't see any kind of indication of, increased staffing, from our operating cost standpoint and the user fees that cover those costs. Capital projects are part of it. The rest of it, a big part of it, is our labor and our labor-related costs, to operate and maintain the plant. And I didn't see any indication of, whether there would be and maybe that wasn't part of the project, a significant increase in labor needs for the agency with these R&M projects and even the capacity projects. Can you guys have any feedback on that?
Yeah, Blake, that really wasn't part of the scope of this effort. I mean, it was really to look at capital projects and areas the agency needed to address to make sure that the facilities themselves were adequately equipped and able to handle current flows and future flows. That staffing and agency piece of it would need to come at a later date.
Okay. Thanks, Tim. With regards to the capital costs, those costs, and I found the part where you said, I just want to, for all of us to note, these aren't what we would expect these aren't just the construction costs. You guys have added in, engineering, construction management, permitting, contingencies, kind of project administration. And so these are kind of not only the hard costs of the contractor, but also sort of the soft costs that go with them. And so confirming that that's the case, and it looked like your multipliers were good. I think it was, the construction cost times, like, it was another, 110% or 2.1 times the construction cost to get to the actual cost that we saw there. And so I think it's important for us to know that. I looked closely at the flow estimates, and thought that they were good and conservative for the 25-year period. Our district in particular is a lot of the contributing increase in high occupancy flow. We have the most room for growth, and I thought the numbers, again, probably a little bit conservative, but that's the way they should be, but were appropriate. And then your peak wet weather flows looked reasonable too. I don't know whether, there was any consideration of, we're in this kind of, climate change world where, storms of the past are maybe going to be different in the future, and whether that was anything you guys looked at, or, with regards to peak weather flows or with regards to average dry weather flows, the increased conservation and whether, while the flows might go down, the concentration, because the loading may stay the same, the concentration goes up, and whether you saw that as impacting unit processes. So I guess two different questions there. One about, did you think about climate change and peak wet weather flows? And two, did you look at conservation and the kind of conservation of water and increased conservation of or concentration of nutrients and how that might impact the unit processes?
So, the peak wet weather flow question, the climate change impacts come up quite a bit. I think by using the 10-year 24-hour design storm event and factoring rain on snow events, we are fairly conservative in that regard. We are looking at worst case scenarios. And, what we've found, Blake, when we do the analysis of climate change is, the curves are shifting, and, maybe the storms are peakier and happen at a less frequent interval. I think what we've done covers the range of conditions that we could expect in the future. And we did base it on, recent rainfall events and the patterns that we're currently seeing now, which I think are fairly indicative of what you'll see in the next 20 years. If you look at climate change science and the real impacts of climate change, we're talking about time periods of the, 2080 and 2100 periods where you see significant sea level rise and things like that. So over the next 20 years, I think we're adequately conservative on our peak wet weather flows. The conservation issue is an interesting one. And I think if we were dealing with an agency like the city of Modesto or some city in California that's based on a purely, baseline residential flow rate, we have to consider that conservation. And what we've seen since, the droughts of 2013 and the state mandated, reductions in water demand, we have had to adjust for that. The challenge that you guys have is that we have to plan for high occupancy flow, and conservation doesn't totally affect that the way that it would in other agencies. So if we're looking at, a typical agency that we would be planning for, we look at average dry weather flow and base wastewater flow and plan for that because it's fairly steady throughout the year. But for you guys, you have these extreme events that we have to account for relative to capacity of the treatment plant and capacity of the TRI. In regards to loading, Ricky can talk maybe more about that, but your assumptions and your statements about the loading concentration staying the same is fairly accurate, and it does fall in line with the same discussion around the unique nature of your agency.
Yeah, I'll add that we did look at, the potential impacts of Senate Bill 605 or 606 and Assembly Bill 1668, which are the drought planning draft legislation that's out there, which I think it requires reduction down to 50 gallons per capita day by 2030 and then down to 47 by 2035, I believe. And so we did look at that in the process modeling that we did with BioWind modeling and how those increased concentrations would impact the plant. And the plant has, fortunately, a good ability to handle some variation there, as well as, meeting that, that summer high occupancy load condition that we looked at with the 8 MGD. And so that 8 MGD future 2045 takes that into account.
Thanks, Ricky and Tim. Couple other just real specific questions. Just looking at the 5-year window in the capital improvement plans, there are 2 of them that make up probably almost 50% of the, $40 million in costs we're looking at in the next 5 years. And I thought maybe you could just kind of elaborate on those projects a little bit for us and anybody who might be listening. One of them is what you defined as the WRP, or the Water Reclamation Plant project number 17. That's the primary and secondary rehabilitation, $10 million in the next 5 years. And so maybe you could just, in a nutshell, I know it's in the report, but not everybody is going to go through it. So I thought, since these are really the big ones, it might be good to just sort of say why we're looking at $10 million in capital projects within the next 5 years on that one. And then the second one was the WRP 10 digestion improvements, which we're looking at projected $7 million in capital costs.
Sure. I'm going to go ahead, Tim.
Yeah, go ahead, Ricky.
So yeah, those 2 are the 2 major projects here in the near term. The primary and secondary treatment repair, it's mostly a repair project. There's a lot of elements out there. There's some crumbling concrete, cracks in concrete on some of those structures, those older 1975 structures that needs to be addressed. And these are large tanks. The carbonaceous oxidation tanks are fairly large. There's also some drainage issues on top of the older tanks that were done differently in the newer version of these tanks that are at the facility, but the older version, they've got, they don't have drains at the top. And so when snow accumulates or liquid accumulates on top and then freezes over, it's quite a hazard for personnel, for district maintenance or agency maintenance staff that goes out to, fix mixers or look at instrumentation out on top of these tanks. And so that's something that we wanted to make sure was addressed. There's also some concerns over at the primary clarifiers. Some of those haven't been recoated and rehabbed in a while. And so in order to keep them operational and in good condition, prevent additional corrosion, there's some recoating associated with those, as well as the dome covers that are over those primary clarifiers. We've started to see some degradation of the concrete on that cover structure, and so there's some ventilation issues that need to be addressed there to prevent additional degradation of that concrete, as well as repairs of the repair of what's already happened to that concrete. So I think that covers the majority of the other piece of that was the primary sludge pump stations for building 51. That's all, most of that is all 1975. The agency's already seen failure of one of the pumps. Fortunately, they have additional capacity there they can accommodate with the other ones, but all of those pumps are aged, and it's hard to find replacement parts for those, as well as the electrical gear in there is all original 1975, and so replacing that as well was a high priority. As far as the digester project, that's the other big one, and that one's actually already started some preliminary design efforts or feasibility study on that project. There's concerns there with meeting the National Fire Protection Code. There's things were done a little differently back in 1975 than there are if we were to design it now. So that building, that older digester control building, shares a wall with the digesters, which is currently against the current codes. If you were to design it now, you don't want any type of equipment that would generate a spark in a room that's could potentially have digester gas or methane. So there's that hazard that we wanted to make sure was addressed. The location of the flare as well is too close to the digesters, and so relocating that flare as well as the boilers. They've had several issues with the boilers in that control room failures, and those are critical to keeping the digestion process, heating the solids and keeping that digestion process working properly. And so the way it's currently configured, they can't just replace those boilers. They have to be in a separate building due to current NFPA code. And so that's a large part of that cost.
Thanks. Yeah, those some pretty major projects there. Last question I had is we've had discussions amongst this group, and we always talk about our soil aquifer treatment system and making sure we've got available space. And there was questions at some point whether the system was starting to fail as a treatment system. Can you remind us what the findings were with regards to the, possibly having to put additional area in service for percolation, disposal of our final treated effluent?
Yeah, and that's always been something that has been in the plans. I think the 2003 plans showed an area for that future expansion of the SAT, and the agency has land for that expansion available. So the plan was to basically add, double the capacity of the SAT and from what's already there. It's a little hard to know for sure what the capacity is of that SAT. So we didn't go into great detail into looking at the capacity of it. We just made some assumptions, and looking at future load conditions, assumed that there would be a need for expansion there. I think we've got it planned out in phase 4 to add additional SAT capacity for the plant.
Okay.
Super. LaRue, I think is Dan gone temporarily?
Yeah, it looks like he stepped away. Do you mind fulfilling the role?
Yeah, no problem. So thanks for that. And looks like Lane, you have a.
Yeah, I got a question with regards to the one CIP project, the Wastrip project, which that was one of the few that actually will reduce operating costs as far as less lime used. Can you go into that CIP project?
Yeah, so the idea there is, in addition to reducing the lime, is also to recover the phosphorus, and they pelletize it, and then that can be used as fertilizer. Kind of going on to what Blake said about the waste as a resource.
Right.
It's something that if anybody's familiar with the Tumwharf facility down in Reno, they have an Austera process there where they do just that. And so similar to that, it's looking at can we do something that would make more beneficial use of this phosphorus, as well as hopefully reducing the amount of lime that's currently used. There's a lot of lime that's used in terms of to assist with that phosphorus and chemical precipitation process. And, you know, also a lot of trucking associated with the chemical solids. So helping to mitigate some of that. So that one, I think we've got a two-step process, looking at first a feasibility analysis, and that would look into, you know, whether it's cost, you know, there's some cost benefit to doing this, what the cost savings are, what the payback, what the ROI would be. And then if that makes sense, then that would move forward. And so there's costs in there for in the improvements plan for addressing that.
Yeah, I thought that was, I mean, not being aware of that and seeing that in the report. What phase was that one?
I believe it's in phase. Let me make sure. I think it's phase 2.
And what was the cost?
Actually, no, sorry, it's a little further out. We have it for implementation in phase 3, but looking at whether it's one, 2, 3. No, sorry, it is phase 2. In phase 2, so phase 1, we're going to look at whether it makes sense, and then it would be implemented in phase 2.
Right. Okay. Good. Thank you.
Dale, Dave, any more questions?
Good.
I've got another one. I hate. Go ahead.
I'd like to talk to you on the side, Blake, about, you know, your value that you put on our solid waste. I know you know what you're talking about when you say that, but I'd like you to be able to familiarize your old pal Dale with the value of our solid waste so that I can understand what you're talking about.
It's just nature, Dale. You know, it's recycling. I hate to put you guys on the spot. I don't know that the data was in here, but I'm curious, you know, just trying to put this $140 million in capital costs into perspective over the next 25 years, what the investment the agency has made in it. You know, if one were to look at all the capital improvements we've done to date to create this plant, and they were perhaps, you know, scaled up to $2021, I wonder what that would be. I have a feeling, you know, that and I don't know that you guys probably did that, not part of the scope, but it would be a nice thing as we take this and go forward with potentially going out to change our user and service fees and connection fees, to put it in perspective. You know, I have a feeling that, you know, if we put the capital costs of the plant to date, it's not that unreasonable in the big picture that we've got $140 million in kind of mainly rehab and repair stuff on a plant that, you know, it might be $1 billion at this point of capital facilities that are out there. You know, there's some sticker shock when you talk about, you know, $140 million, but the reality is, you know, the facilities we're responsible for maintaining are significant. And, you know, it's not surprising that there's a high cost to maintain them. I mean, and they're treating, you know, abrasive, and there's a lot of stuff wearing and tearing on them in just our general outdoor climate. And so as we kind of move forward in this process, it'd be good to, I don't know whether, LaRue, you probably wouldn't be too hard for you guys to figure that out. It'd be a good number to have as we go forward as to, you know, what our investment to date has been, and, you know, and the significance of not maintaining this, not putting the money into it, you know, results in, you know, I mean, it's not a penny, you know, they say a penny saved is, or an ounce of prevention is a pound of cure. You know, it really is the case in these types of things. You let things go too far, and we're going to be spending a lot more than 140 million and looking at potential violations and fines and the public perspective and all that. And so I think it's a big price that price tag we're looking at. It's, you know, it is the cost of doing business and providing this essential service to keep the Truckee River clean.
Wow.
Go ahead, Blaine, and then I'm gonna.
Yeah, one thing, Blake, I mean, I look at it that, okay, 25 years at 140 million, roughly a little over 6 million a year financially to accomplish that. Don't forget, we just spent 50 million in 203 on the plant expansion. The good thing that I'm hearing as far, reading over that report and everything is capacity is very good at the plant. We have adequate storage for peak uses. We almost have 3 times the amount of, when they're talking about 13 MGD, and we have almost 40 million MG in just in storage capacity. So those things were really positive. But looking at the plant, like you said, the big number in how we look at things and prioritize our projects and implementing them into a financial master plan to meet the CIP master plan are going to be two different things. And we have to after we get through this budget period, we need to start looking at that.
Okay, thanks, Lane. Questions or comments from other directors? Okay, let's open this up to public comment. Rochelle, do we have any public comment on this item?
Yes, we do. We have Pippin Mater. And Pippin, go ahead.
Great, thanks guys. I've been waiting for a while to see this and I really appreciate it. It's been really interesting to look through. So for Carollo, I really appreciate the Q&A at the beginning. You had like frequently asked questions that I appreciated, especially as it related to, Blake brought up climate change, flow changes associated with that. And the flows were one of the numbers that like, I was nervous. I guess I wanted to understand, right? You use 10-year storms and that being right a 10% chance of occurring every year. And I guess I want to understand what happens in a 20-year storm or a 50-year storm or 100-year storm, right? Like I understand you can't design for every possibility, but what happened? Is there blackwater flooding in Tahoe City and North Tahoe? What actually happens in those events? And certainly what you said was, Tim seemed right, that what we're seeing as a result of climate change is more peaky storms, and you can see it this year, right? December was a record for most precipitation, and then January is a record for least precipitation, right? So I'm hoping for March, miracle March, but we'll see. Just bought some powder skis, but anyway, so I wanted to bring that up and sort of like understand what the repercussions were of the flow. I just have 4 separate comments, so that was the first one. The second was on these optimization projects, and I'm specifically looking at page like 809, where there's a chart showing the phases, and that those phases, a lot of the sort of optimization projects, which are the ones that I feel like kind of are the most interesting to me, and certainly I feel like they're the ones that actually improve the plant as opposed to just maintaining status quo. And those are almost all in phase 5, or a lot of the cost is, and I'm a little bummed to see that. It's just kind of again, like Blake was saying, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. Like if you can do those things earlier, then you get the benefit of them throughout the time period. So, I'm especially interested in the biogas portion of it. It seems like a real shame to be flaring that, and the chlorine disinfectant to switching that to UV or something similar. It's later in the agenda, but we all saw some of the issues associated with OSHA and their concern about the chlorine disinfectant, the chlorine gas and safety associated with that. So anyway, and the phosphorus removal, that's a great project. I'm super supportive of it. I did want to ask a couple of questions about air quality permits. Specifically SO2 and methane. Did you consider participating in cap and trade programs for methane? And is there an opportunity there? And also just kind of wanted to point out there's some things I know that like the furnace is out of date, and if needed to be repaired would have to be entirely replaced. And of course, best available control technology for stationary sources would require a massive upgrade there. And I didn't see that, although to be honest, I didn't dig maybe deep enough. And finally, I want to talk about costs. clearly that's the number that pops out, the 144 million. You divide that by 40,000 accounts. That's like $3,600 per account per year, or per account. And then, 100, or if you divide that out per year, you end up with like right over 25 years, $150 a year, not accounting for inflation. So that's a big number. And while I totally respect what you're saying, Blake, that, this is expensive plant and the cost of operation is also, fees haven't been increased since 2005, basically since the recession. I'm sure Lane has it on the tip of his tongue, but
1 minute warning, Pippin. Sorry. Go ahead.
Looks like he's muted right now.
Oh, sorry. Now get a whole nother minute to talk again. I'm asking to unmute and it's not going again.
Okay, I think you're there now.
Go ahead.
All right, great. So
One
on the
moment.
on the financial part, I ran into this with our local HOA, right? It looks like a little bit of a lack of planning when there's just no increase in fees for a decade, and then there's this huge increase, or there's going to need to be, maybe not huge, but there's going to be a noticeable increase, right? So I think Blake's right. They really need to think about how that is explained to the public in a way that that makes sense. That's it. That was my 4 comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Pippin. And does anyone else have public comment? You can raise your hand. Let me lower this one so I can see if there are any others. And I have none.
No other public comment? Okay,
None, sir.
thanks, Rochelle.
No problem.
Lots of good feedback from the board members. Great report from Carrillo. I believe this agenda item, the purpose of it is to receive the report. I believe there's no action on this. This shows up basically as the report presentation, an opportunity for Q&A.
Right.
And I believe we've concluded that. So I think our next agenda item is consideration of accepting the sewer master plan.
That is correct, Dan.
Thank you. Board members?
I
shall we-
move to approve to accept the master plan as presented.
I'll
Thank you,
second.
Joe. Seconded first. Motion by Director Cox, second by Vice President Trezin. Any other comments by board members? Any public comment?
No public comment.
No public comment. Blake?
I'm just going to say, upon acceptance, can we post? I know it's a gigantic document and maybe it needs to be broken up, but it'd be nice for this to be, I know it was part of the agenda, but somehow be stored on our website under documents or something like that. So available both to the board and to the public. So I think a controlling enough document, it'd be nice to have it readily available on the website.
As a separate
I
document.
think, if it's so big, I think at least the executive summary.
Right.
That was 79 pages. That was good.
LaRue?
Typical with other reports we do post it on the internet. What we could do is break it down to volumes 1, 2, and 3 because they are quite large. And they'll be posted to the internet, to our website.
I can do that today.
Great. Okay, so we've got a motion and a second to approve and accept the master sewer plan. Sounds like there's no further public comment on this item. Dave?
You've got to, Jay,
Yes.
get your attention.
Dan, am I able to make a comment right now?
Absolutely.
Okay, I'd just like to thank Carlo and their team. They did an excellent job on the master plan. We are very satisfied with the end product and everything leading up to it. You guys did a great job, exceeded my expectations, and I know other people feel similarly. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jay. Yeah, good work by everyone. Okay, So with that, Rochelle, if you could take roll call.
Yes. Vice President Tresson,
Yes.
Director Lewis,
Yes.
Director Cox,
Yes.
Director Smelser,
Yes.
and President Wilkins.
Yes,
Motion approved.
thank you. LaRue.
Dan, can I request that we have an adjournment for about 10 minutes before we go to the next agenda item?
Absolutely. Does that work for the other board members?
Yes.
Okay, so we will adjourn for 10 minutes and we will reconvene at 11:05. There's a possibility that I may not be on at 11:05 because of another, I may need to step away for a bit more than 10 minutes. And Blake, if that's the case, if you guys could start the meeting without me, and if Blake's willing to manage it, that would be much appreciated.
You got it.
Thank you.
Okay, so we'll go back into open session and move to item number 5 in the regular agenda, approval to award the 2022 roof repair project.
Would you mind addressing that one, Jay, please?
Yep, no problem. Hello again, directors. Vice President Truson. So before you today is the roof repair project. This project builds on the recent projects that we've had on the roof. But the focus of this phase is for building 2, building 3, 4, 6A, and 6. And if awarded by the board, field work is slated to occur between June 13 and September 9. The project was bid on January 20, and we received one bid, and this was from Centimark Corporation, Roseville, California, for $420,316. After review of the bid, it was determined that the bid is responsive with minor irregularities that can be waived by the board. The total price is less than the engineer's estimate, $575,000. The recommendation is for management and staff recommend the minor bid irregularities be waived and award the bid for the 2022 roof repair project to Centimark Corporation and approve a contract up to $460,000, which is the bid amount, $423,616 plus 10% contingency.
Thanks, Jay. Any questions?
I'll move approval, provided it's okay with council, as he's gone over the bid irregularities and he feels we're in proper standing.
Great. Dale, any?
Yes. I would second that.
I concur with the staff recommendation.
Okay.
Sounds good. Any comments from the public, Rochelle? This item?
No public comment.
No public comments. Looks like a great bid. Maybe our things are coming back in line with, reasonable prices, not going up. So we have a motion from Lane, a second by Dale, and if there's no other comments, Rochelle, if you do a roll call.
Sure. Director Lewis,
Yes.
Director Cox,
Yes.
Director Smelser,
Yes.
and Vice President Tresson.
Yes.
All right, motion approved.
Great. Moving to item 6, approval for the general manager to negotiate a contract or contracts with a qualified contractor or contractors to perform the 22 control room upgrades project.
Could you also provide a summary of this for us, Jay, please?
Yep, absolutely. So this is the 2022 control room upgrades project is before the board in December of 2021, where we requested authorization to advertise and solicit bids for the project. We bid the project and we did not receive any bids. So what we did is right on the heels of that, we advertised again. And thinking that maybe the holidays had interfered with, some contractor plans. We advertised a second time, and then no bidders attended the mandatory pre-bid conference. So we know already by definition that we will not be able to accept any bids for that. So there is a agency ordinance. It's number 3-2015. And there's a clause within that ordinance that states that if no responsive bids are received by the bid deadline, the contracting agent, TTSA, may authorize the work by negotiating, approving a contract or contracts with a qualified contractor or contractors. So our estimate for the job is $149,000. And what this item does is management and staff recommend approval for the general manager to negotiate a contract or contracts with a qualified contractor or contractors to perform the work.
LaRue?
And I just want to clarify that this is not approval to a blank approval to enter into the contract, just to negotiate. And then we would come back at a later board meeting for board approval.
And yeah, so we had a similar situation come up a few years ago. I believe it was 2019, where we didn't have any contractors bid on one of our projects. We received proposals, evaluated proposals, came back to the board with what those were. So yeah, that's correct. We'd be coming back with the results of our solicitations for proposals.
And the timing works for you guys with that? It seems like we would be within our rights to authorize you to negotiate and execute a contract with qualified vendors on a not to exceed amount, which might, would prevent you from having to come back in March to do this. But if there's not a time constraint, I think probably the board would prefer to see the contractor and award that. So long as that's not a time constraint with a construction schedule, that sounds good.
Yeah, with respect to construction schedule, fortunately, this is indoor work. So there is some, while we think we still have time to maintain this original schedule, even with this proposal step, if we find that we do need more time, because it's indoor work, we can flex the schedule a little bit.
Okay. Dave, Dale, Lane, any questions?
No questions.
Nope. I'll entertain a motion.
Also move.
Second.
Motion by Dave, second by Lane. Was there any public comments on this item, Rochelle?
No public comment.
Okay, and we'll do a roll call.
Okay, we have Director Lewis,
Yes.
Director Cox,
Yes.
Director Smelser,
Yes.
and Vice President Tresson.
Yes, good luck, guys.
Motion approved.
Take us to item 7, approval to award the open channel flow metering devices project.
Oh, do you mind taking that one, please?
Yes. Good morning, Vice President Treason and board. As you may recall, we tested a Hawk Flowdar open channel flow meter during the period of May 5th to June 29th of 2021. We had overwhelmingly positive results. Operations and maintenance both agreed to proceed with the purchase of 2 new flow meters. So in January of 2022, the agency solicited proposals for the procurement of those 2 open channel flow meters and on-site consultation services, with the goal being more or accurate influent flow measurement that would be installed at more suitable locations, that is upstream of the first unit process and downstream of the last contributing flow. 2 meters utilize a Doppler radar system along with a level sensor that allows it to measure velocity as well as level. The combined technologies are able to provide consistent accuracy that is more resilient to turbulent flow conditions. Utility Systems Science and Software was the only vendor to supply a bid. That bid was determined to be both responsive and responsible. The total bid amount was $38,375.64, which is less than the $50,000 that was approved for the current year budget. Both management and staff are recommending the approval to award the project to Utility Systems Science and Software and approve a contract amount up to $42,500, which is equal to the bid amount plus approximately 10% for contingency.
Thank you, Paul. Lane?
Is there any software licensing agreement with this, with those with that purchase?
There is cellular service that would be for the parallel line. That would be
Okay.
an ongoing maintenance fee, but there is no software per se. So that cellular and data connection would be an ongoing annual fee under the current configuration.
Good, thank you.
Dale, Dave, any questions?
None.
Paul, I had a question. It's an open channel flow metering device. Is this just being installed in a manhole? And so it's bouncing the level sensor off the water level in the manhole, or is there a particular open channel device? At our agency, we have lots of 17, flow metering sites, but they all have partial flume configurations. It's not just a pipe bottom that we're doing it. So I'm just wondering, it didn't look like the price included any flume device, just the depth measurement device.
That's correct. The influent float, or these FLODAR devices that are being proposed, they're able to measure flow in an open pipe, an open channel, or a flume. They're very versatile in that regard. So the two different locations that are being proposed for installation, one is in a manhole that would have an open pipe, and the other one is in a vault, actually, that we're currently using for influent sample or influent sampling. So that is also an open pipe, and it can account for those quite easily, provided we give the configuration proper setup, and the engineers are able to calculate those numbers.
So with two devices, how will you report influent flow if you're getting it from two different devices? If they're going to have some variation in their.
So one device is on our primary or main line. It's a 33-inch main line that we use primarily during most of the year. The other one is for a parallel line. It's used much less often, and that's a 36-inch line. That's the manhole unit. That would be a battery-powered unit. That would be the cellular one. That would be connected by a cellular. The other one, the primary or main unit, would be connected to the plant directly through our SCADA systems and directly to our power feed.
Okay, so it's the parallel pipes that you have that come into the plant, that you have one on each. They're not in series, they're in parallel.
That's correct.
Gotcha. Okay, thanks. Any other questions? If not, we can.
I'll make a motion for move approval.
Thank you, Lane.
Second.
Motion by Lane, seconded by Dale. Any comments from the public on this item? Further
No public
discussion? If not, we'll do the roll call.
Director Lewis,
Yes.
Director Cox,
Yes.
Director Smelser,
Yes.
and Vice President Tresson.
Yes,
Motion approved.
Thank you.
good project. Thanks, guys. And item 8, approval of resolution 1-2022, approving the bidding exception and authorizing purchase of a used man lift.
Thank you. Currently, the agency, and historically as well, their agency requires the need for a man lift. And in the past, we've just gone ahead and rented it from a company. Over the past couple of years, we've encountered problems with availability. We have looked in the past also about purchasing a new one, but because of the cost amount and the frequency that we'd use it, we didn't think that was a viable option. We do think, though, that there is an option to purchase it on the used market. And we think that would be more of a beneficial purchase. However, based on our procurement policy, we have to write up a specification. It's usually pretty simple when you're specing out new equipment, but since this is a used equipment, there's a lot of other variables such as run times and conditions. We thought it would be best to go ahead and use the exemption provided in Ordinance 3/2015 to where we can have a resolution that would authorize us to go ahead and purchase the man lift independently. And the amount that we have budgeted in the past is for that we have budgeted in our current budget is $60,000. And that is the amount that we have capped ourselves to for the purchase. So the recommendation is to go ahead and approve resolution 1/2022, which is approving the bidding exception and authorizing us to purchase a used man lift.
Thank you, LaRue. Questions from the board?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, let's
Good.
start with Dale. Go ahead.
What kind of variety, LaRue, of options do we have? Is there a lot of these used man lifts out there that for us to choose from, or is the supply or the quantity limited?
I would presume it's limited. I think a lot of the rental companies are using it, and then when they've reached their specified hour or run times, they're going to go ahead and offer them up for sale. I haven't done a survey of the local area or within a few hundred miles out to see what the availability is.
So buying one used would be a better option than going ahead and buying one new and having it for a long period of time, or?
I still think we would have the used one for a long period of time as well. But we're looking at a cost difference of approximately $150,000 versus $60,000. And the rate and frequency we use it, I didn't think that was a wise decision to move forward on a new unit.
I understand. Thank you.
Wayne?
You know, on the on purchasing used equipment, do you have the availability to bring in somebody to evaluate the piece of equipment before we buy it?
We could look into that.
Because there is no warranty, I imagine. So, I mean, just any type of rental equipment, I'm somewhat leery of, and if we can, you know, just make sure it's sort of like a home inspection type of deal, that we're not buying more maintenance than it's worth.
Correct. Yeah, there is a risk associated with purchasing used equipment. We'll look at options to see how we can vet it out to see which would be most beneficial for us, Wayne.
Okay.
Dave, any questions from you on this item?
No.
I don't really have any technical questions. It seems, you know, overly cumbersome that we had to write a whole resolution to do this, but Dick, was the recommendation to move forward with this used equipment purchase?
Correct. The general manager did not have the discretion to proceed otherwise. The only discretion he had was to do the formal bidding, which really wouldn't have worked for this particular purchase.
Okay, very good. Did we have a motion yet?
I'll make the motion that we approve resolution number 1, 2022.
I'll second.
Sounds good. Any other questions? Any public comments?
No public comment.
No comments from the public. We will proceed with a roll call.
Director Lewis,
Yes.
Director Cox,
Yes.
Director Smelser,
Yes.
and Vice President Tresson.
Yes.
Motion approved.
Good luck on that. We're going to want to borrow it over here.
You could rent it.
I was just about to say, for a small fee, we can write up a contract.
Right. Item 9, report on the Cal OSHA inspection.
Okay. I'll go ahead and I'll take this one. I'm going to essentially just hit the highlights that's in the staff report here. So a lot of it's going to be redundant. I'll follow it with a brief summary. This is just a report, so there's no action. But we did have a inspection performed by Cal OSHA where we received a citation and notification of penalty. And I just wanted to make sure that it was brought up to the board's attention and we can have a discussion on it. So with that, I'll kind of summarize and provide some background for you. On July 29, 2021, Cal OSHA performed a site visit to the agency where they met with 2 employees and interviewed them. They also performed some various site inspections with the plant. After that inspection, they went ahead and requested numerous documents, which included our agency safety policies and programs. They followed up on October 19th and performed another day of site inspections where they interviewed 2 additional staff members on site. Afterwards, they went ahead and interviewed 2 additional staff members, which I believe were performed over the phone. And while they were here, they also performed site inspections as well. On January 24th, the agency received a citation and notification of penalty from Cal OSHA, which cited 6 violations with a total monetary penalty of $9,410. With that citation and notification of penalty, it allowed us to have an informal conference with the district manager of Cal OSHA to discuss the violations, which we did take advantage of. And on February 2nd, we held that informal conference. And as a result of that, the Cal OSHA amended and provided us with an amended citation and notification of penalty. And with essentially the changes were changing the number of violations from 6 to 5, changing one violation type from serious to general, and reducing the total monetary penalty from $9,410 to $3,430. In the board packet is the actual notice, the citation and notice of penalty, but I'll just go ahead and summarize them real quickly here. Citation 1, item 1 is essentially an access to employee exposure and medical records. It is a regulatory violation type. The penalty amount was $135 for it, and the violation was corrected during the inspection to the satisfaction of Cal OSHA. Going on to citation 1, item 2, which pertain to respiratory protection, specifically medical evaluations. Again, it is a general violation type. Amount penalized is $135 again. The status, the violation was corrected during the inspection to the satisfaction of Cal OSHA. Third citation is citation 1, item 3, which is a process safety management of acutely hazardous materials. It is a general violation. The assessed fee for that was $410. Again, the violation was corrected during the inspection to the satisfaction of Cal OSHA. Citation 2, item 1, the description summary of that is respiratory protection, excuse me. That violation type is serious, and the amount assessed was $2,475. Again, the violation was corrected during the inspection to the satisfaction of Cal OSHA. And the fifth citation is citation 3, item 1, which is emergency eye wash and shower equipment. That violation was serious, which was dropped down to general, and the amount was reduced to $275. Again, the violation was corrected during the inspection to the satisfaction of Cal OSHA. Unfortunately, the agency was not aware of all of Cal OSHA's interpretations of various building and safety codes. However, the agency did go ahead and make the necessary abatements for all of the violations. Additionally, we went ahead and updated our safety policies and programs, and we provided staff training. So that is the report. The details are in the attachment, but I wanted to make the board of directors aware of the citations. With that, I can take some questions and go from there.
Lane?
Yeah, who is, when Cal OSHA comes out, do they contact Mike Smith, our safety officer? Which isn't that sort of the protocol? How does it go?
That is the protocol for the scenario. They came on site and we do refer them to Mike Smith. Jay serves as the support for Mike. Is that correct, Jay?
Yeah, Mike is the designated liaison for all regulatory agencies. So yeah, Mike is the person that they meet with.
Okay, so basically our last inspection was in 2017 or 18, is that correct?
Late 2019.
Okay, late 2019. Was there any change in Cal OSHA's, every year, they update safety requirements, because it seems like the violations that we got weren't noticed in 2019. We hadn't changed procedures. Was there was a change in Cal OSHA's requirements, update, or not? They're just not finding those things back in 2019.
I think those are older regulations, Lane, meaning there hasn't been any changes to it. We do not know why they weren't picked up during the most recent visit or the prior visit.
Okay, but there wasn't any new regulations from Cal OSHA during that period, correct? And we didn't change any operational procedures, correct?
That is correct, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Questions, Lane? Dale, David, any questions regarding the OSHA inspection?
Yeah, I got a question, Blake, in regards to the violation that is serious. It's the respiratory protection. Is that violation, LaRue, any indication of negligence on the agency's part?
Not in my opinion, sir. No, I think it was just a difference of opinions in the interpretation.
And it was discussed with the inspector in regards to the seriousness of the violation?
We did. That was one of the violations discussed in the informal conference. And the position the agency has or had was that the APRs provided the staff that work in that in the area there. Whenever there is a IDLH, they are to escape. I think the concern is that OSHA's interpretation is they need to have a different sort of respirator. So we have corrected that by now requiring an SCBA. So it'll be the self-contained breathing apparatus, for lack of a better explanation, scuba equipment where it's forced air. So we have taken that potential out of the equation. Cal OSHA was very happy with it, and it just removes the risk.
Okay, and Mike Smith was present during the discussion.
Yes, he was. He did a great job explaining the situation and how we handle things.
Okay.
And LaRue, just to clarify, you're using some acronyms that I'm not so familiar with. Prior to having to, now when you enter that facility, you have to put effectively this supplied air scuba equipment. But prior to that, to enter that area, you used a full face mask with cartridges that would remove chlorine, but then you'd have to leave. If there was an alarm, you'd have to leave immediately and then return with that the scuba equipment. And now you just, anytime you go in there, the staff is required to wear this full supplied air system, right?
That is correct. The direction was if there was a leak, leave. We do have a response team that is to deal with matters afterwards.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Other questions? Following up on Lane's question, J.R. LaRue. So an inspection here in 2021, it sounds like OSHA showed up at 2019. Were there any findings in that visit? Nothing?
Nothing.
And then how often, is this a 2-year cycle that they come to TTSA? How often have we seen them show up?
They can show up anytime.
But our history, in terms of the history of their inspections at TTSA.
I would say there's been at least half dozen inspections since in the last 15 years.
Okay, so it's not that out of line, and this was just a random surprise inspection. I imagine they probably do that and have a cycle for visiting facilities. They can also probably respond to, phone calls or notifications, but there was no indication that this was anything but just their regular kind of random inspection. It sounds like it's on around the cycle that we've seen historically.
Yeah, it was part of their QSV process. So they informed us in the beginning that, rest assured that this was not anything prompted by, that they weren't here from direction from an employee. They call it their program quality verification process, where they come in and do a complete program review.
Thank you. So Dan, welcome back.
Thank you.
We're on the Cal OSHA item and it's not an action item. We're just discussing it. And so I think we're pretty much wrapping up here. I don't know that you had any questions regarding this item.
I was able to listen in on the discussion, even though I wasn't able to have my video and audio on. So I don't have any further questions.
Okay. Well, LaRue, thank you for putting this on the agenda. I think it's good to be as transparent as possible with the public, and glad we were able to make the changes and the magnitude of the violations and the ability to get them corrected. It sounds like we're on track. So thank you.
Thank you.
Dan, I'm going to hand it back to you.
Thanks, Blake. So if that item's concluded, I believe the next item is discussion of in-person board.
You got to go public.
Public.
Sorry.
Okay. Great. Rochelle, if you could.
Yes, we do have a public comment. Pippin Meter. Go ahead, Mr. Meter. You have 5 minutes starting now.
Great, thank you. Just a couple of quick comments. One was, I respect that this ruling got reduced to 3,000-ish, but, I looked up what the OSHA fine was for the ski patroller that died a few years ago because of inappropriate handling of explosives for at Alpine related to avalanche control, and that was a $20,000 fine. And so I just I was trying to understand what the scale of the when I originally saw the mention of this last month, and then understood the $10,000 fine to be in place from Cal OSHA. The other was, I did want to understand that what was happening as far as SCBA requirement. Would that be required for more people? Does that require more? ASUT training? And if it does, do you have proper safety issues in place for that? And then finally, I recognize that it's sort of easy as a member of the public to come in and sort of take pot shots, and I'm trying not to do that too badly, but I do feel like this OSHA issue and the master plan both give a little bit of the impression that the agency is operating kind of a step behind, and they're getting kind of having to play catch up when an outside agency or group or court or whatever come in and bust them on something. So I guess I would, I get that you can't have everything perfect every time, but on the other hand, it does look a little bit like this isn't proactively, the agency isn't proactively being operated. That's the end of my comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Pippin.
Thanks, Pippin. Any further public comment, Rochelle?
No other public comment.
Okay. Thank you. Actually, I did have one question, LaRue, in terms of how is our track record on workplace, like lost time injuries in the workplace?
I think we have over 3,000 hours without a lost time work incident.
3,000 hours or 3,000 days?
Days, excuse me, days. Does that sound about right, Jay? I had that number in front of me a few days ago.
Yeah, it's something like 9.8 years, so just short of a decade.
Yes.
Wow.
We have a great record here.
What's the district's XMOD?
XMOD?
That's the workers' comp kind of metric for how you are relative to others. Vicky probably knows that one.
Yeah, she's not on the meeting. Like I don't know what the value is.
Anyhow, I believe it's below 1, which means relative to your peers, you perform have low rate of claims regarding workers' comp and injuries. So.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Thanks for that additional piece of information. Okay, that concludes item 9. Next on the agenda is item 10, which is discussion of our next board meeting and whether we should do that in person or whether we want to do it remotely again. And LaRue, did you want to take this?
Yeah, and there's been some recent changes to the masking mandates, which I was going to bring up in the general manager's report. But we still have COVID cases occurring, so my recommendation is that we continue for the next month to adhere to AB 361, and then we make the decision and have that discussion on a monthly basis.
You're recommending that we do go with a remote meeting for our March regular meeting?
Correct, I do.
Okay. Any questions or comments from board members on that?
No objectives.
Until things start going the other way, let's keep everybody safe and keep the remote meeting going. Hopefully in April we can meet together.
Okay. Hearing no objections to that, is there any public comment on this item?
I have no public comment.
Okay, so I don't believe this requires formal action. This would just be general direction.
Correct.
Okay, and you feel that you have that, LaRue?
I do have direction, yes, thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right, next on the agenda is the management team report. And we would start out with department reports. And who would like to go first?
I'll go operations. Good morning, Board of Directors, President Wilkins. For the operations department, all plant waste discharge requirements were met for the month. The plant performed well for the month. Caustic was added to the final effluent to maintain the neutral pH. 2 completed work orders, 4 pending. In the laboratory, staff performed necessary laboratory testing. Shift operator training for the weekend testing was completed for DOCs. Laboratory information management system, LIMS system, has been purchased and service agreement is in place, and we've installed the install schedule has been initiated. So we're taking steps to complete that and have that a functional system for us. And we've also created a schedule to ensure that we establish the NELAC Institute or the TNI system implementation. And we had 0 completed corrective actions and 0 pending. And you can see the flows for the month. And that's it for the operations department. Any questions?
Seeing no questions from board members, I think we'll hold public comment on department reports until the conclusion of all of the department reports. So who would like to go next?
I can go next here for the maintenance department report.
Thank you, Paul.
Thank you. Good morning again, President Wilkins and board. Apologize for the earlier mispronunciation of your name, Director Tressen. So with regards to the work orders completed, as you can see, we had a slightly lower number this month. That was due to quite a few unexplained or unplanned absences, but we were able to meet department expectations with regards to preventative maintenance and any high priority work orders. Next slide, please. So during the month, we were able to provide some support for the Headworks Improvements project. We were also able to wrap up some additional work for the plant painting project. We were kind of held off due to weather. Obviously, December was a pretty rough month for weather, and we couldn't get to the last bits of electrical and the lighting out on one of the strippers for that. We also continued on with the Lucidity CMMS project implementation. We've made some pretty good headway on that as far as training other users and things. So as previously mentioned, you can see a picture of one of the skid steer blowers. The last month, the equipment took a little bit of a beating trying to keep up with the pretty dramatic snow event that occurred in December. So the skid steer blower was damaged during that event. We were able to get that repaired. The other picture shown here is the thickening polymer demo. Operations is still exploring polymer replacement at this time. So both mechanical and electrical provided some demo work in that area in preparation for that effort. We also were able to make further improvements throughout the plant with regards to LED lighting down at our MPPS building. That's providing a much higher quality light at a lower cost. So we're able to fit that within the budget constraints. We're also moving on with the logical implementation in the IT department right now, and also providing support for the IT SCADA master plan. That is an ongoing effort that we anticipating bringing to board at a later date. And that is all I have for the board at this time.
Can we go back one slide, Paul? Maybe you can touch on those pictures, please.
Oh, sure. Yes, I apologize. So as you can see in the left-handed picture there, we've got a filter press feed pump stator. That stator replacement, it's a fairly big job that had to be replaced. That's for our filter press feed pump. On the right-hand side, that's a good picture of one of the ongoing efforts that we've kind of discussed in the past or has been discussed at previous board meetings. We're moving shops and we are prepping that floor for an epoxy coating. And as you can see, we've got 2 staff members performing that work. That should be completed very soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Paul. Any questions from board members for Paul?
Yeah, Paul, on the AWT panel demo and modification, you guys did that in-house, huh?
That's correct. Yep.
Yeah, I mean, that looks pretty complicated.
Yeah, it is. There's a lot of work going on there. Removing a lot of the controls and relays and things. There's quite a bit of wiring. We have one person assigned to that who's pretty well dedicated to that effort and is doing a fantastic job for us.
Who is that?
That would be Ryan Schultz.
Does Ryan have a lot of scheduled electrical? It seems like we got a lot of electrical to take a look at walking through the plant that, that hasn't been the regular maintenance items. So he must have a pretty good list of things to get done.
He does. We're able to allocate a good amount of his time right now, especially during the winter months when outdoor work can be limited at times. So we're able to get a lot of this work done now during these months. As we move into the spring and summer months, we'll probably dedicate more of our time to the outdoor repairs and just upkeep of the plant.
Okay. Well, I'm glad to see it's done in-house. That's great.
Thank you. Thank you. Appreciate it.
I was just going to say, good job on upgrading the lighting to the LEDs. And that kind of segues, I'm going to jump back to Mike for a second with you give us a nice chart of chemical power and sludge disposal costs. And I just noticed that, electricity kind of seemed to be extremely high in the month of January relative to the previous 12 months. What was going on in January to drive those electricity costs up?
Actually, it's the extra usage from the LED lights. No, I'm joking. It actually is when we look back at we noticed that too, look back, and it was a 20% increase in electrical costs. We went from about 10 cents a kilowatt hour to a little over about 12.5 cents per kilowatt hour.
So it's a change in the rates from PUD.
Yes.
Not electricity usage was flat, but relatively flat, but the rates have gone up.
Yes.
Wow. Okay. So we'll probably see that continue to go across the board. So even better incentive to look for efficiency projects.
Yes.
Thank you.
Any other questions from board members? Seeing none, who would like to go next on department reports?
This is Jay, I will. So for the engineering report for the month, projects completed, master sewer plan, we just saw a presentation on that. 2021 digital scanning of sewer lines project, we're paying out retention there, so that one's complete. Projects under construction, the headworks improvements project, we have a punch list. There's still a number of items that contractor needs to satisfy, complete, in order for us to declare that one fully complete. Scrubber improvements project, we are in this middle phase. Projects in bid phase, we talked about roof repair today. We also talked about control room upgrades, and the plant coating project is bidding next week. Next slide, please. And then projects in development, digester improvement study is ongoing in the study phase, and 3 projects in final design, which would be the 2022 digital scanning, the 2022 filter influent condition project, the plant improvements project, which comprises of plant final effluent flow meter and some new valves in the yard. And then the 2022 sewer manhole adjustment project preliminary design, and that's adjusting some of the grade rings on the TRI at a number of manholes out in the field. Are there any questions?
Yeah, Jay, it seems like that, is the contractor dragging its feet on that headworks project? I mean, are those items that are on the list to be completed, are they any major issues?
Most of them are minor, but one of them is we have a gearbox that was started to show problems before we got to substantial completion. And so that item on the gearbox has been on the list for a while. The contractor has not been responsive on that item yet. And so we're, we don't want to inherit this as a problem that hasn't dealt with, and we need to. So I would say the gearbox is what's holding it up mostly.
That's a supply problem?
It's a manufacturer defect, yeah.
Okay, all right. Good. All right. I just wonder. It's been going on for quite a while.
Those other items are pretty administrative and can be handled quickly, but we're looking to the contractor to handle the gearbox problem for us.
Okay, thanks.
You're welcome.
Other questions or comments for Jay? Seeing none is, I believe, it's Crystal, our last department report.
That's me. So, in our finance department, we are still continuing submitting additional requested support items for the auditors, hoping that wraps up soon. Then we completed the W-2s and 1099s in January and participated in the finance committee meeting on February 7th. Then could you go to the next slide, Rochelle, please? Maybe.
She's on the.
Thank you, Rochelle. So in our billing customer service department, Celeste completed all the January 2022 direct billing. She had one re-inspection of the Donner Center, and January we had 6 residential permits for connection fees and 1 accessory dwelling unit. And then we had 70 or 80 EDUs, 79 of them being in TSD. And we have a picture on the next slide of what those EDUs were for.
Rochelle, can you go to the next slide, please?
And this is the 68 residential units in TSD as part of the Frischman Hollow 2 project. Next slide, Rochelle, please. And then the investment funding, we are continuing research and meetings on potential investor investment opportunities. We have submitted an offer and acceptance of our purchasing agent position. And then we also completed and filed the state controller's report to the state of California. That is it for me. Do you guys have any questions?
Any questions from board members? Seeing none, thank you, Crystal. And I believe that completes the department reports. So at this time, I would open it up to public comment on any department reports. Do we have any public comment, Rochelle? I saw her shake her head no, but she was muted. So I assume that means we have no public comment.
Sorry, I was answering the phone. I have no public comment.
Okay, thank you. Okay, next would be the general manager report.
Do you mind putting that presentation back up, Rochelle, please? Thank you. So I have just additional items to add. Some of it you've already heard, but I'll go through them anyway. This first update is really about how we're doing on the software. Logically has now installed their new antivirus, phishing, malware, and spam software. We've gone through the testing procedures, so that's found to be beneficial. Management, like Paul had stated earlier, management staff are attending or had attended the implementation planning workshops for the SCADA master plan, so that project is moving smoothly. We are now in the process of training the majority of the staff for Lucity, which is our asset management program, with the intent to start getting into full implementation with that. And then to add, the operations department has now chosen a WIMS software package. As you're aware, we did one for the laboratory, LIMS. This is WIMS, so it's Water Information Management System. So we're in the process of deciding that, and we expect that next month we'll come back to the board for a request for approval on that one. Next slide, please, Michelle. What I will, while we're waiting for that, I'll just give thank you. Just an update on the back one, please. Just an update on the recruitment. So the maintenance mechanic position, we did offer two offers of employment to two candidates. They both accepted. One's expected to start at the end of this month and the next one in March. For the operators, likewise, we had two offers to individuals, and they will both be starting in March. And as Crystal alluded to, the purchasing agent accepted the offer of employment, and she is expected to start at the end of February. And the last slide, please. And I just want to give a COVID update. As of today, midnight today, the first thing this morning, the California Department of Public Health, CDPH, they issued an order, and they essentially are requiring unvaccinated individuals to wear masks in public spaces. So staff that are vaccinated here are allowed now to not have to don a mask. In their order, they also required some other specific orders as it pertains to like emergency shelters, cooling and heating centers. We were also governed by the Nevada County Department of Health, and they will be following the CDPH order. So as of right now, if you are vaccinated in the agency, you're allowed to not wear a mask. Just want to provide that update to you there. One thing down on the slide, though, it's been a very challenging month when it came to staffing. We've had a lot of absences for various reasons. And, I wanted to make sure that I want you guys to know and all staff to know that we appreciate everybody stepping up, because there were a lot of departments where you would lose 20–30% of attendance. So staff did a great job stepping up and meeting the demands for the agency for the month. With that, I have nothing else to add to the GM report. I can take any questions, Dan.
Thanks, LaRue. Any questions from board members?
Hey, LaRue, how many total employees do you have, and how many are unvaccinated and subject to the mask rule?
We have, I think right now, about 46, 48 employees. And if I remember right, when we last did a check, we're looking about 50%, 50–60% that are vaccinated.
Okay, so 40% still unvaccinated and are required to wear their masks.
Yeah, or they just
spaces.
Yeah, or they haven't attested to it or just don't want to share the information. If they don't want to share it, we kind of put them in the category of unvaccinated and having to don a mask.
Right. Maybe you could also, I know that there was another change in COVID having to do with employer required provided sick leave.
Correct. It's the SPSL, and we had a policy for that last year when the Delta variant was going through. As I understand it, the federal government has adopted that, where we would go back and have a retroactive date where we would apply a sick leave for anybody that was subject to COVID. I haven't seen the specifications on it. I don't have the details to it, but once that does go through, we will go ahead and come back next month with a plan or a policy and have that be adopted by the board. Very similar to the process last year. And that will help alleviate individuals that were suffering through COVID and having to use their own personal leave. If you recall, the last SPSL was 80 hours, so it does help staff tremendously. I think there's variations, as I've heard, of 40 or 80 being applied under certain conditions or standards. And again, I haven't seen that, but when it does come through, we will bring it to the board.
Thanks.
Thanks, Lou. Any other questions or comments from board members?
This is Shanahan, just a response to that last issue. LaRue, I'm reasonably certain that within recent weeks that COVID supplemental sick leave bill was passed and signed. I'll send you the bill number, but I'm reasonably certain that was approved.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
And I think it's retroactive to the first of the year.
Okay.
All right. Thanks, Dick. If there's no other board member questions or comments on LaRue's report, I would open the general manager report up to public comment. Rochelle, do we have any public comment?
No public comment at this time.
Okay, thank you. Okay, next on our agenda is an opportunity for any member of the board to make comments on items related to TTSA. Do any board members have any comments they'd like to share? Blake?
2 items. One is just, follow up on our acceptance of that master plan and just, I guess, my desire to see us get on an agenda going forward, putting out an RFP for a consultant to come in and do a rate, connection fee and service charge analysis, adequacy study with recommendations. I'm not necessarily saying it needs to be March that we have to have it, but I just think it's, we've got $140 million. We better take a look at what our rates are, and the sooner we kind of move forward with that, I think the better. So that's one item there. I'd like to see come back to the board. And then the second one is just related to some stuff we've done here at TSD that's of value to, I think, TTSA and all the member agencies. And that's that, you saw how that peak wet weather flow spike drives a lot of capacity related costs. TSD over the last couple of years came up with a product to reduce I&I and actually went into a partnership with a manufacturer on the production of a product. It's called the Hercules Shutout, and it just recently has gone live, and I think has the ability not only for our area up here, but for our industry, sewer industry as a whole, to potentially cut some of that spiking that happens when you have these big rain events. Basically, it's just a lube product that you put in the manhole, between the manhole cover and frame. So when you set that cover in place, it creates a watertight seal around that. We found that there's a ton of water that falls right through that opening at the surface. And so I'll be reaching out, and our staff will be reaching out to you at TTSA as well as the member agencies about this product. And again, I think it's going to be a little bit of a game changer for our industry. It was developed by our staff when we were trying to investigate why we were seeing, despite all the efforts we've made to reduce I&I, why we continue to see I&I in rainfall events. And we think this is going to actually be something that's going to be a big boom for our entire industry, and potentially can, over time, if it works and proves itself, some of those capacity driven costs based on that peak wet weather flow, that peaking factor is going to come down quite a bit and potentially save our industry a lot of money. So exciting
Chief
stuff.
Blake, I thought, Oz always said your system is gold over there, You got the same problems everybody else does.
But not anymore.
Has this been trademarked or patented yet?
Yeah, I think I told you the company is called Odie Company. They are a large out of Cleveland. They're a large manufacturer of a lot of plumbing products, and they've got a bunch of different lines that they sell. One of them is Hercules. They sell pipe thread compounds and other stuff through their Hercules line, and so they're calling this product Hercules Shutout. When we came up with it and reached out to them, I told them they needed to call this, and they didn't like the idea, nor did my staff. I wanted to call the product, how manholes are often abbreviated as MH. So I wanted to call this Preparation MH. It was a lubricant you put on the manhole seal. It seemed like a perfect name for the product.
You have way too much free time, buddy.
But they didn't go with that. So part of our deal with the Odie Company is that TSD gets free product for the next 5 years. And so we're expecting to get 600. They come in little like caulk gun cartridges. So you just become standard operating procedure. When you open a manhole, you put a bead of this down before you close the manhole. That manhole now is sealed from any inflow, odors escaping, and it actually lubricates the joint there, so your guys won't get back and shoulder injuries trying to get stuck manholes open. So again, we're hopeful that that this can make a difference and, possibly result in savings at our districts as well as TTSA and our industry as a whole.
Next month, we can expect to hear about the suppository.
When when we're back in person, I'll bring you guys samples.
All right, thanks, Blake.
You bet.
Any other comments from other directors? All right.
With regards to the Carrillo report, I thought it was an excellent report. I think we need to also, but I think at the same time, we accepted it. But anytime a master plan is a dynamic document and there's changes that take place within it, we need to take a cursory look at it and, like Blake says, figure out what the financial ramifications would be and work from there forward.
I got a comment to just chime in along with what Blake was saying about hiring a consultant. I was very satisfied with Sean Korn that we used, I don't know, a few years ago, maybe it's been several years, but he seems to be good. How long ago was it, Rochelle?
I think it was 2018 or 19 when we did the sewer rates, not the rate study, but it was the rate study for connection fees.
That was 2019.
19, yeah.
2019. Well, I was very, very satisfied with his presentation, the way he, addressed our request. And I don't know if it's law that we go out for an RFP, but I was very satisfied with Sean Korn and how he handled, and it would be a situation where I don't think we'd have to have somebody reinvent the wheel to take care of our needs.
Okay.
LaRue?
All right,
And just
thanks.
to answer Dale's question, there's no legal requirement to go out for an RFP for a rate consultant.
Okay. So I think, I don't want Blake's comment to go by unnoticed. I think Blake is suggesting that we add to our work program within the next few months, kind of initiating a rate and connection fee review based on the new master plan. That's not an insignificant amount of work and not an insignificant effort to put forward. Do other board members have, and correct, jump in, Dick, if we're stepping over the line here. We've had a suggestion to add this to a future agenda. Do other board members, are they in agreement with that, or is there concern with that?
Well, I think it's a little premature right now. We got the report. We've gone over the report. I mean, are all you directors willing to spend $140 million in the next 25 years? I'm not. I'm looking at doing the things that we need to do to keep this plant to be a number one like we have been. A lot of those items in there, I think, could be adjusted and worked through on a different cost basis. But I do agree with Blake as far as once we figure out the total amount of CIPs and when to do them, then we bring in the financial person to make it happen.
Yeah.
Blake, I couldn't hear you a second ago.
I guess I'm concerned with Lane's approach to this, that we are going to somehow cherry pick and select which of those, 100+ projects we're going to include in a rate study or not. I don't see that as a next step in the process. I mean, perhaps as part of the rate study, we look at that, but I don't know that there's a intermediate phase at which we then, either ask staff or the board to, reduce the number of projects that are identified. I think.
Well, yeah, here, let me give you just one example.
And I'm going to make another point, which is, I couldn't help myself. I kind of did some back of the envelope calculations on the impacts of these, $140 million on our potential ratepayers and future connections. And I don't think that it's as significant as we may be concerned that it is. And so I think that we bring on the consultant and use this as the framework, and it's a point of discussion in that process, but I don't see there being a intermediate step where we've gleaned it down to then give it to them for the rate and connection fee study.
I got to chime in here very quickly. Lane, I hear what you're saying, but I think we're looking at a 1 to 5 year, 40 million. Whatever we have to do to ensure that we have an appropriate amount of money in our CIP reserves to fulfill our 1 to 5 year responsibility. I really think that if it's going to take addressing a rate increase, we can't wait till the 11th hour. Let's plan ahead with this, and let's look at what's really necessary in the 1 to 5 year envelope. And let's, we haven't raised rates in an awfully long time, but and I know that just from looking at Blake, I'm probably hitting a nerve, but we got to look at this. And
no, I agree, Dale. I guess I was going to modify my recommendation, which is
I just want to chime in, guys. This is really getting way too far.
So Dick, this is
clearly board interest. This ought to be on next meeting's.
Right.
I think let's continue. Let's put it on next meeting.
I think that the item that should come up is not the RFP, but a discussion of this. So we have this discussion in a transparent, open session to figure out what the direction we want to give LaRue is. So agendize something for discussing this item, not taking action on it.
Okay, Rochelle, I see you want to make a comment.
Yes, actually, we do have public comment.
Okay, I'll take public comment in a moment. So we've had director's comments from Director Trezin and from a couple of others. I think the suggestion is that at our next board meeting, we have a dialogue about whether or not we want to direct staff to pursue hiring a consultant to assist us with rate setting and or with a rate review and possible rate setting and or updates to our connection fee policy. I think I saw general consensus from the other board members about having that as a discussion item. So if staff is comfortable taking that as direction, I think please do. And then before we go to public comment, I wanted to see if there's other directors' comments. Lane, anything else?
I guess I can't. I think, the Corolla study, I just look at one, just the item in there as far as the chlorine facility. It's our brand new facility, at least, and then that's $20 million in there. That's what I was talking about. But anyway, great information study on Corolla. They should be, I think it is a great planning tool for us.
Okay, Dave, any director's comments?
Just that Corolla is a roadmap, and rate study is a rate study. So whatever we get, we take into consideration at the time.
Okay, Dale, any comments from director's comments?
None.
Okay, thanks. So I don't have any further comments. So with that, I would take public comment on the director's comments, if we even need to do that. I'm not sure, Dick, is that?
Yes, given the substantive nature of the discussion you just had, I recommend you take public comment on it.
Okay, let's go ahead and do that. Rochelle?
We have Pippin Mater. Go ahead, Pippin. Pippin, if you're still there, you have permission to talk.
Great. Can you guys hear me now?
Yes.
Perfect. I just wanted to say that you just spent 2 years and almost $1 million, I think, on this study, you know, with a bunch of PhDs and PEs after every name. I guess I would be, as a member of the public, I would be really uncomfortable with, you know, your cursory reading of it massively changing what you're suggesting doing. And I'll certainly comment on that next month when that item is on the agenda. Thanks.
Okay. Thanks, Pippin. Okay, so that concludes director's comments. I believe that also concludes the open session portion of our meeting. We do have an item on closed session for public employee performance evaluation of the general manager position. Before we move to closed session, is there any public comment on the closed session item?
I have no public comment.
Okay, so seeing no public comment on our closed session item, let's move to closed session.